When he regains consciousness, it feels as if his whole body has been battered. He cannot move, and a quick glance shows he is lying in a shabby room in the slums. His sister is sitting next to him, but her appearance is clearly wrong. He remembers how a group of thugs beat them both, and how she covered him by taking every blow herself. After that, she treated him as well as she could while ignoring her own serious injuries for several days. Now those same thugs enter their room again. They immediately kick his sister. She makes no sound and simply falls. It turns out she is already dead, but they do not care. They are only surprised that their beating from a few days earlier killed her. Even in the slums, they understand that everything has a price, even a lifeless body, so they try to take her away. Tiny cannot allow that. He struggles to move, but his weakened body refuses to obey. He only manages to raise his shaking hand slightly. At that moment, his hand begins to shine with a blue mana glow. Suddenly, strength returns to him. He shouts for those bastards to stop and throws himself at them. He even manages to shove one thug back. Then, he turns into a human shield over his sister's corpse. The thugs grow enraged by his defiance, so they begin kicking him without mercy. Tiny withstands the beating, yet refuses to move away from her body. In the end, they abandon the idea of taking the girl's corpse and leave. Once they are gone, Tiny begins to assess his situation. Everything is unfolding differently from his previous life. He cannot understand what is happening, especially since he clearly remembers that he should not have been able to use mana at this stage. Turns out he has regressed. In his former life, he was the strongest hammer-wielding warrior. Monsters had invaded the world, and most of the continent had been destroyed, but he defeated the Beast Lord alone and was fatally wounded. At that moment, an old knight named Asgard, barely clinging to life, called out to him from nearby. He revealed his deepest secret and told Tiny to find him in the past as quickly as possible. Then, with the power of his magic ring, he sent the boy back through time. Now, as Tiny remembers Asgard's final words, he hopes he can change the future this time. After understanding that he has truly returned to the past, Tiny burns with frustration because Asgard did not send him back earlier when he could still save his sister. He cannot understand why he came back to this exact moment. Soon after, he begins coughing blood. He realizes his body is still weak, so he decides not to waste time regretting what cannot be changed. Asgard himself might not have known whether the time travel would work. Instead, Tiny decides to use this chance to properly say farewell to his sister. He recalls Asgard's words about finding him quickly. Tiny is determined to do that, but only after avenging himself on Wolf, the man responsible for his sister's death. In his previous life, he barely managed to get revenge on Wolf, but this time he wants to do it right. First, he must give his sister a proper funeral. Later, Tiny stands before his sister's body, which lies in a coffin as the final rites begin. Irina is not his real sister. However, they both have black hair and black eyes, which are treated as a bad omen on this continent. Because of that, Tiny is rejected by everyone. Irina, meanwhile, lost her own brother and found a new one in him. Tiny regrets never repaying the kindness she gave him. The priest begins the funeral rites. At the same time, Emma, Irina's friend, notices Tiny's grave expression. She can see that he has changed and connects it to the loss of his last remaining family. Emma remembers visiting his home not long ago and finding him eating beside his sister's corpse. The sight disturbed her deeply. What shocked her even more was that all his wounds had already healed. A moment later, he lifted Irina's body. Emma was unsettled by how detached he seemed. Back then, she scolded him, saying he had never listened to her the way he listened to Irina. He quietly thanked her for the soup and promised to repay her someday. Even now, as she watches him, she still cannot understand what was truly going through his mind. Meanwhile, Tiny thinks about returning his sister's kindness. He remembers how she always urged him to stay confident and keep his head high. Now he is determined to do just that instead of sinking into guilt. In his mind, he speaks to his sister and vows that this time he will live without regrets. Month passes. After weeks of harsh training, he burns through his mana. At last, the time has come to take revenge on Wolf. He stands before Wolf's hideout. The underlings see him coming and assume he is just another beggar. They grow irritated when Tiny calmly asks whether Wolf is inside. One of them tries to slap him, but Tiny catches his hand in midair. Clamping down on the wrist with crushing force, he challenges the man, asking whether he truly believes he cannot handle a child. The thug cries out in pain and falls to his knees. Tiny moves toward another underling who cannot understand how a child became so strong. He assumes it may be the result of some drug. Reassuring himself that a child is still only a child, he grabs Tiny by the collar, planning to toss him aside. The thug only manages to pull Tiny's shirt. It feels as if he is trying to lift a block of solid steel instead of a person. Tiny taunts him, saying he is clearly heavier than he appears, and that the man man is only wasting his effort. Then he kicks the thug away. In truth, Tiny is pleased with his progress since his mana has finally synchronized perfectly with his body. It is an achievement he never reached in his previous life. This hidden training method lets him grow stronger by keeping his mana and physical frame in constant interaction. The only drawback is that he must consume huge amounts of food to continue developing. With Emma's help, he managed to handle that problem. As he stands there absorbed in his own thoughts, the remaining thugs only stare at him in confusion and fear. He understands that newly awakened mana is weak, yet extremely easy to absorb into an already wounded body. He throws the thug upward, mockingly thanking the men for beating him before. The man flies straight into the hideout's building, smashing through it as everyone inside instantly goes on alert after seeing the intruder. They recognize Tiny as the beggar child from earlier. They ridicule him for arriving alone and without a weapon, but Tiny merely smirks. While holding one thug by the leg, he states that he does have a weapon. The man screams in fear and pain as Tiny swings him like a flail, using his body to smash the other thugs. Most of them are completely horrified by what happens. After some time, everyone is knocked down, defeated by his human weapon. Once the weaklings are handled, he shifts his focus to the stronger enemies. Only the Landers brothers remain. With a small flick of his finger, he dares them to attack. One of the Landers brothers readies his sword, prepared to pierce Tiny's body. Then he stops when he notices the mana circling around Tiny's small body. Greed rises in him since the bodies of mana users can be sold for a high price. Meanwhile, Tiny looks casually bored as he sees that the man he is using as a weapon is worn out and about to collapse. He recalls how his instructor once scolded him for using a human body as a weapon. Back then, to make up for Tiny's brutal fighting style, his instructor taught him close-range combat. It is the same technique he is about to use against the brothers. Both brothers charge at him at the same time, but he steps back from their blades, having already read their movements. He punches one brother and kicks the other. Then he grabs one of them and slams him hard into the ground. Before the body even hits the ground, Tiny reaches him at lightning speed and kicks him once more. At last, both of them are defeated. Then Wolf, the leader of the invaders, finally appears. From his previous life, Tiny already knows that Wolf is actually a werbeast. Not an ordinary one, but a silver werbeast, known as a direct descendant of the werbeast royal family. Back then, he never learned how such a rare werbeast ended up in the slums, because defeating him had taken everything he had. Now he is certain he will uncover the truth. Wolf is shocked to see Tiny defeat his men so easily. When Tiny challenges him and declares that he will kill him as well, Wolf immediately begins transforming, ready to punish the boy. Tiny is pleased to see him use his full strength from the start. However, Tiny is stunned when Wolf finishes transforming. He is not a silver werbeast. Instead, he is only an ordinary mutt. Wolf becomes furious at what he sees as an insult. He charges at Tiny, slashing at him again and again. While dodging his attacks, Tiny considers the situation. Wolf is indeed faster and stronger than the Landers brothers, but he is nowhere near as powerful as the silver werbeast Tiny fought in his past life. Tiny grabs Wolf by the jaw, crushes it with mana, and hurls him aside. Once, one of his werbeast comrades taught him how to handle their kind when they lose control. Now Tiny plans to use that advice. Enraged, Wolf charges at him, but Tiny evades every slash of his claws. From his blind spot, Tiny strikes him with a powerful kick, deciding that he deserves punishment. Satisfied, Tiny prepares to beat him to death, or at least close enough. He kicks and pummels him without stopping. He remembers how his companion once told him to beat the beast out of them, since werbeasts can endure such damage through regeneration. A moment later, he throws Wolf into a wall. The impact cracks the wall, and something drops out from inside it. Wolf returns to his human form. Tiny notices that he has regained awareness. Wolf cannot understand why Tiny is beating him and questions his reason. Tiny resolves to break his spine this time. He wants to beat him until he apologizes to his sister. Once it is over, he hopes his sister will finally find peace. When Tiny makes it clear that he intends to kill him, the terrified Wolf begins apologizing to both him and his sister. Tiny admits that no matter how much he wants to kill him and offer his body at his sister's grave, he knows Irina would not be pleased to see Wolf's face there, so he chooses to investigate instead. He threatens Wolf, warning that every unanswered question will earn him another beating. Then Tiny notices a monorock on the ground. He picks it up, since he does not remember seeing it there in his previous life. The moment he touches it, he senses dark energy within. Soon after, he sees a silver werbeast bound in chains, roaring inside the rock. His eyes widen when he understands what it is. He recalls how his elf companion once showed him spirit beasts. These beings are known to gather mana for several centuries, memories, often going through rebirth during that process. Spirit beasts are extremely rare and usually live only in Elfenheim. He knew that much back then, especially after she showed him a spirit stone, which contains the very essence of a spirit. Once he realizes what he is truly holding, he wonders how Wolf managed to obtain something so valuable. On top of that, this spirit rock is tainted with dark demonic energy. First, Tiny breaks the dark chains that bind the beast. As soon as he does, the beast's memories rush into his mind. He sees a silver wolf trapped by suspicious figures radiating dark energy. They attack the wolf from every side. Once it is brought down, they stab its body with dark daggers to draw out the spirit stone. Then he sees a child being given the stone. In the next moment, the child absorbs it and turns into Wolf. Tiny understands that this is the distorted method used to turn a human into an artificial werbeast. Now it makes sense. This time, Wolf failed to absorb the stone completely, which is why he never transformed into a silver werbeast. The silver wolf's spirit steps forward, prepared to take revenge on the human wolf. Tiny stops it, declaring that he wants Wolf to suffer more before he finally dies. He is surprised when the silver wolf appears to understand him. He recalls Estina once explaining that a human with a pure soul and enough mana can become a spirit mage. She had suggested that children usually have the greatest chance. He assumes that since he is young again, he may meet the conditions to become a spirit mage, which could be why the beast understands him, though he strongly doubts that his soul is pure. The answer comes from the spirit beast itself, which explains that when he broke the chains, his mana filled the cracks in the broken stone, allowing them to communicate. Tiny asks whether they can form a contract. The spirit beast immediately nods. Tiny extends his hand, eager to officially make a contract with it. He knows that, unlike ordinary magic, spirits do not need constant control from a mage. Instead, they can move independently as physical partners. They only require a stable supply of mana from their summoner. Moreover, they grow stronger together with their mage. That is exactly why Estina was known as the strongest among the 10 knights. The spirit beast gives one condition. It wants revenge on its enemies. The boy agrees at once, since he already intends to fight the forces of darkness. After they set a few basic rules, the contract reaches its final stage. Tiny decides it is time to give his new partner a name. He names him Walung, a warped version of Moon Wolf. Now the main question is who was supporting Wolf from the shadows. Tiny is sure they belong to the forces of darkness because of the dark energy he sensed. They are demon followers, fanatics who worship demons instead of the god. Before the Beast Lord's army appeared, these demon followers were already spreading chaos. At that time, Tiny was inside a labyrinth, so he knew little about them. He kicks Wolf and demands to know whether the demon followers gave him the spirit stone. When Wolf does not come out of his daze, Tiny asks Walung to deal with it. Walung releases a roar that shocks him awake. Tiny asks again, adding that he wants to know the group's location and their current plans. Wolf laughs at him with a threatening look. He explains that he was only an experiment to those people, and they will never let Tiny escape after this. The moment he speaks about how powerful they are, his head bursts apart. Tiny immediately realizes that some kind of spell had been placed on him to keep him silent. He remembers that in his previous life, Wolf warned that they would hunt him down. Back then, Tiny thought Wolf meant his own underlings, but when he investigated those men at the time, they did not even know Wolf was a werbeast. Choosing to leave the issue aside for now, he looks at the crack in the wall and wonders what else is hidden there. He throws Wolf's body against the wall. With that extra force, the structure collapses completely and reveals a hidden safe. Tiny decides he will tell Asgard about this when the opportunity comes. He says that he trusts his old companions, then corrects himself. Asgard will become his future companion. He opens the safe and finds a huge treasure inside, but only one thing matters to him, the ring of Valentia's seal. He needs it to approach Asgard. This is the ring Khloe gave him. She had told him to find her with this ring, promising that she would help him. At that time, she said he must already know who she was. Tiny knows that everyone in the Azeran Empire knows her as Khloe von Valentia. She is Asgard's youngest daughter, famous for her kindness and known by the nickname Angel of Valentia. When she turned 16, she traveled across the territory. According to Valentia tradition, once their children reached adulthood, they offered flowers at every temple in the territory so their names would become known. That was when he met her in the invader district of Philly's estate, located on the border of the Duke's territory. In his previous life, he took his revenge too late and failed to claim the ring in time. That is why he could not use it back then, but this time it can help him arrange a meeting with Asgard. Now he knows that someone else is about to arrive. Tiny is correct as a knight appears at the crime scene. The knight concludes that the culprit must be a mana user, judging from the way he grabbed a man by the leg and swung him around. He cannot believe a child could have done this. When the thugs confirm it, he refuses refuses to believe them, accusing them of being drugged enough to invent such claims. He then kicks one of them for failing to stay under Wolf's control. The man is Sir Ram, captain of the Phyllis Estate Guards, who plans to squeeze even more money from Wolf once the incident is resolved. However, his plans are interrupted when Tiny appears on the staircase, causing Ram to ask whether he caused the destruction. Tiny admits it without concern, and as Ram grows furious at his boldness, Tiny points out that he only beat a commoner like Wolf, which should hardly be important enough for a knight of Ram's rank to handle personally. He calmly adds that Ram's presence must mean he has been taking a large amount of hush money from Wolf, and the insult drives the captain into a rage. Ram immediately activates his mana to attack, but the display only earns Tiny's silent contempt, as he notices that the captain has not even reached the second stage of mana usage. Before Ram can strike him, Tiny knocks his hand aside, realizing that he can deal with this man without using his full strength. He charges at Ram, preparing to hit him with a knee strike, but his opponent blocks it. Ram admits that Tiny is powerful, even for a child, and pushes him back. Tiny only wants to show enough strength to force a negotiation. He cannot afford to make the Lord his enemy yet. He jumps into the air and retreats. Since Ram commands many knights, Tiny only needs a way to make him stand down. Ram becomes irritated that his attacks keep missing. He is about to draw his sword, but freezes when he sees Wulong behind Tiny. Tiny studies Ram's reaction. He knows that seeing a spirit beast in the invader district is almost impossible. Tiny goes straight to the point. He understands Ram only cares about payment, so he offers to pay him the same amount Wolf did. Ram cannot believe a child has that kind of money and assumes Tiny must be an older mage hiding his true form with magic. Tiny says he has gained a strong reputation in the district. Ram tests him, claiming Wolf paid 5 platinum coins and asking whether Tiny can match it. Tiny does not fall for it because he figures Wolf actually paid 1 platinum coin, so he offers 1.5 instead. Ram becomes angry at the proposal. Before he can make a threat, Wulong roars, stopping him completely. Tiny calmly warns that Ram will die if he refuses the deal. At last, Ram puts his sword away. He never expected a child to negotiate like this. Tiny asks for his final answer. Ram says he will wait for the payment by the end of the month. The surviving thugs beg him not to abandon them, but Ram angrily strikes one of them aside. Tiny then tosses the coins to Ram. He asks him to set up a meeting with the Lord so he can claim control of the invader district. Ram promises to report what happened to the Lord, but warns Tiny that he will face the Lord's anger if the payments stop. After he leaves, Tiny arrogantly wonders whether that day will ever truly arrive. He turns toward the thugs trying to slip away. He orders them to bring every working woman and beggar child currently in the invader district. Then he adds a cold warning. For every minute they are late, he will kill one person. If they attempt to flee, he warns that his spirit beast will chase them down and finish them. He gives them exactly 1 hour. Terrified, they all hurry off to follow his command. If everything goes according to his plan, he will settle matters here within a week. After that, he can finally meet Asgard. Sometime later, the frightened thugs bring everyone inside. Emma is among them as well, worried when she sees him there, her gaze fixed on the blood staining his knuckles. He explains that it is not his blood, but Wolf's. Then he shows everyone Wolf's corpse and declares that the man is finally dead. Everyone becomes anxious since Wolf was backed by the Lord. They fear the Lord's anger will fall on them. When they point out that deceiving a noble is a crime, Tiny confirms it. He explains that the Duke of Valencia will also learn that the Lord has been lying to him. Now Tiny has proof, and he plans to expose the Lord's corruption to the Duke. A few days later, 2 guards are discussing Ram's disappearance. He is currently on probation because of the incident in the invader district. They assume it was merely a power struggle between thugs. Although they have heard rumors about a mysterious ghost or a giant wolf, they do not believe any of it. Thugs always exaggerate. Besides, Wolf is dead and his entire fortune has been stolen. Ram was eventually punished for failing to deal with the new boss, since after the incident, every shop in the invader district stayed closed, causing merchants to file complaints one after another. The Lord grows more furious as his main source of income begins to disappear. At last, he summons the new boss to his residence. Meanwhile, Tiny listens to the 2 guards gossiping. That day, Tiny brought up what would happen to the Lord of Phillies if his crimes were exposed to Asgard. In his previous life, he did nothing after obtaining the ledgers because he believed all nobles were the same. Back then, he simply gave half of Wolf's fortune and the ledgers to the Lord in exchange for freeing a few people he knew. He had not been wise enough yet. Only after becoming a knight did he understand that there is always a higher noble above the lower ones. He turned to Emma and stated that the most important thing was that all of them were now free from Wolf's control. Then he urged them to take their revenge. As if on cue, Emma was the first to kick Wolf's corpse and release her anger. Encouraged by satisfy her, everyone began striking the body to let out their grief. Tiny knew that nothing he did could completely erase their suffering. Even so, he offered wolves money to them, telling them to take as much as they needed. He asked them to take the gold and leave the invader district. They were stunned when they realized he was giving away the entire fortune. Emma asked about his own share, but he answered that he had already taken what he needed. She stressed that he also needed money, even if he did not yet fully understand its value. Then he turned toward the women whose eyes now showed greed. He warned them that if they used that money for crimes or went to the Lord, Wulong would rip them apart. Everyone froze in fear at the sight of the spirit beast. He faced Emma again and advised her to go to Diane if she planned to leave. He suggested they travel as a group and hire mercenaries for protection. When she asked about him, he replied that he had somewhere else to go. Emma was worried at first, but after seeing Wulong, she realized he would be safe. She agreed to go to Diane, but told him to find her if he ever needed help. He thanked her. From that day onward, the Phillies entertainment district shut down completely. In the present, one guard asks for the new boss's name. At that moment, they notice Tiny standing nearby, and he answers that the new boss is Tiny. They warn him that a commoner child cannot roam freely near the Lord's residence. Then the first guard suddenly questions how this child knows the boss's name. Summoning his silver wolf, Tiny reveals that he knows because he is the boss. Inside the castle, he grows bored after finding himself in another situation, where he is looked down on because of his small body. He stands before Kran, commander of the Knights of Files. Kran remarks on how young he is, having already heard about him from when Tiny taunts him, saying it is rude to keep a guest waiting while judging him. The commander becomes furious and reminds Tiny of his position. Tiny answers that Kran should remember his own place. He stands below the Lord, so he should not dare raise a hand against the Lord's guest. The commander sneers that Tiny reeks of the gutter. Tiny fires back that Kran is the one who reeks. Enraged, Kran draws his sword. The butler steps between them, reminding Kran that the Lord is waiting. Kran eventually apologizes and puts his blade away, warning Tiny to watch his words because the Lord is a harsh man. Tiny pays little attention to the warning. Still seething, Kran decides he will kill the boy as soon as the Lord gives the order. Kran then announces Tiny's arrival to the Lord. The Lord permits them to enter. After passing through the doors, Tiny is stunned when he sees the Lord. Hiding his shock, he immediately bows and greets the Lord properly, making Kran wonder where he learned such manners. Tiny answers that he practiced the proper way to greet the Lord. Tiny, however, remembers him from his previous life. Back then, the man was an obese addict. This version must be from before drugs ruined him. Healthy or not, he remains a corrupt lord. Sending the ledger to Asgard as evidence against Timon will surely destroy him. Tiny only needs to keep him there. The Lord notes that Tiny shows him better manners than he showed Kran. Tiny humbly acts as though he cannot treat a sword and its master the same way. Then he makes a shocking declaration. He wants to become Timon's knight. Timon sees this as Tiny treating Kran like a rival and becomes interested in his ambition. However, he doubts Tiny is truly a child. He suspects the boy may have dwarf or elf blood. Tiny insists that he is only 13, leaving Kran completely stunned. Timon rises and moves to the real issue. Tiny destroyed his income from the invader district despite claiming he wants to become his knight. Timon demands an explanation for what he has done. Tiny replies that he did everything for the Lord's benefit. Timon is left speechless by the answer. Tiny continues, explaining that although Timon seems intelligent, he may not truly understand how the real world works. Kran offers to kill him on the spot, but Tiny explains his reasoning. He claims he acted because rumors had begun spreading that Valentino was learning about the prostitution and drug trade in Timon's territory. Kran flinches at the mention. Tiny brings up Khloe's coming-of-age visit to the invader district, claiming he heard about it from the people who accompanied her. He argues that he simply handled the matter for Timon before it became a major problem. Inside, Tiny grins, having successfully twisted the truth while Timon tries to verify the story. Timon considers whether Asgard is planning something before Khloe's visit. Kran tries to dismiss Tiny's explanation, but Timon shouts at him to stay out of it. Kran immediately apologizes. In the end, Timon praises Tiny's actions, even though his methods were somewhat rough. Tiny thanks him, but Timon is still not done suspecting him. He has already heard that Tiny possesses the spirit wolf. He coldly asks whether Tiny stole it from Wolf Spirit Stone. The boy had overlooked this, never expecting Timon to know about the stone. The next moment, Walling appears beside him. With the wolf's help, Tiny can see what ordinary sight cannot. A swirling dark energy wrapped around Timon. That means he is a dark mage. Tiny knows demons grant power to those who offer sacrifices. From the double circle around Timon, he must have given up hundreds of corpses or dozens of living people. Suddenly, Tiny remembers the thugs who who tried to take his sister's body. They had said people were buying corpses for a high price. He concludes that Timon must be the one purchasing bodies in the invader. That means Wolf had been backed by a dark mage from the start. Tiny wonders who Wolf truly was. Timon demands an answer, but Tiny pretends not to understand. Timon immediately signals his knight, who draws his sword at Tiny. The boy knows he cannot defeat both of them with his current strength, but he summons his familiar anyway. Walling appears behind him, and his roar stops Kron in place. Timon, however, remains completely unmoved. He curses Wolf for being useless and decides to replace his test subject. Hearing this, Tiny realizes they may intend to use him for experiments. Timon asks Kron about the child's strength, and Kron answers that Tiny will soon reach the second stage. Timon notes that this places him on the same level as a knight. Kron says Tiny must be a genius to awaken mana by himself, especially since he is not a noble trained from birth. Timon is surprised. Kron adds that although self-awakened mana is rare, Tiny's mana is refined and does not leak. His mana circles are stable, meaning someone must have taught him through a secret growth technique. Timon wants to know who trained him. Tiny understands that Timon will not believe him if he says he created the secret growth technique himself. So he lies, claiming his parents taught him before he came to Phil's. He explains that they taught him these breathing techniques since infancy, and he only later realized how important they were. Timon pauses to think it over. Tiny knows Timon has no way to check the story. So many refugees entered the invader district because Timon allowed them in solely to increase his income. Tiny states that his own strength should be enough proof. To his surprise, Timon accepts the explanation. Tiny did not expect him to drop the matter so easily, and he is right. Timon is not finished. He decides to let someone else judge it personally and orders Tiny to stay where he is. He remarks that Tiny made things more difficult by killing Wolf. Tiny wonders who this unknown person might be. His eyes widen when he considers that they may belong to the group Wolf mentioned. Since Timon is a dark mage, Tiny assumes this newcomer may be one too. Being caught by someone that powerful would be a disaster. Timon cuts into his thoughts, asking whether he accepts the offer. Tiny immediately declares his loyalty. Then he asks whether the incoming guest is someone important. Timon confirms it and warns him to be extremely respectful. Tiny begins calculating his remaining options. In 3 days, Asgard will have examined the ledgers and uncovered the truth. It will take another 3 days to gather a disciplinary force, then more time for them to reach Filey's estate. Altogether, help will need about half a month to arrive. He hopes this special person comes after that period. He asks when the guest will arrive, pretending that he wants to learn etiquette to greet them properly. Timon answers that they will arrive in about a week. Tiny stiffens the moment he hears it. Later, Tiny considers his new problem. This mysterious person will arrive in only 1 week. He has 2 choices. First, he can flee. The people of the invader district have already left, so disappearing from the Lord's men would be simple. The problem is that this would turn him into a wanted man. It would cause serious trouble later when he needs to meet Asgard, and he needs that meeting to happen smoothly without interference. Besides, the mere idea of running away irritates him. He knows he is not strong enough yet, but he believes there may still be a way to win. Then comes his second option. Since the person will arrive in a week, everything depends on who they are. He wonders whether they might be some kind of official, but then he remembers that Timon said he would let this person see for themselves. After considering it, he realizes the visitor cannot be a high-ranking noble, especially with how quiet the estate remains. From what he can tell, this person must be someone suspicious. Tiny decides he must cause chaos in Phillies before that person arrives. He plans to create a major disturbance and draw public attention that might force the guest to delay the visit or cancel it entirely. It is a hurried plan, but it is his best chance. To make it work, however, he must become strong enough to defeat both Timon and Kran. He pauses his thoughts for a moment because, after all that training, he is unbearably hungry. Sometime later, everyone is shocked to see how much Tiny can eat at his age. They guess he may really have dwarf blood, since dwarves usually eat as much as orcs. Ignoring their stares, the boy eats until he is satisfied. Now that his mana and body synchronization is complete, he needs more fuel to keep growing stronger. He realizes he will not need spirit medicine or secret elixirs to maintain this pace. His meal is interrupted by a knight, Sir Grant, who has clearly come to lecture him about his eating habits. When Tiny casually asks whether the man has a problem, the knight demands that he show proper respect to his elders. Tiny sees no reason to respect someone who came only to start a fight with a child. He provokes him further, staying calm while calling the man a fool. Enraged, Grant attempts to punch him for the insult. Another man, Gren, sees what is happening and asks the knight to settle down, since Tiny is only a child. At that exact moment, Crane appears behind them and tells Gren not to interfere. Tiny Tiny smirks. He realizes the commander has come to test his abilities. He stands up, ready to show what he can do in battle. He understands that Timon is the one manipulating everyone here. Outside, Sir Grant prepares to teach the boy a lesson. Tiny reminds him that he is unarmed and says Grant may regret this later. The remark only makes the knight laugh. He tells Tiny to take a sword because he plans to finish him instantly, even mocking him by asking whether he is losing his nerve. In response, Tiny kicks him in the ankle, causing him to stumble. Grant steadies himself to avoid falling and tries to throw a punch, but Tiny ducks away from. Gathering mana in his foot, Tiny strikes his shin again, making the knight groan from the pain. Grant cannot believe Tiny has this much power at the first stage. Even with his legs aching, he refuses to accept defeat. Tiny notices his determination. Completely enraged, the knight prepares to attack again, but Tiny slips away to protect himself. Then he jumps into the air and lands on Grant's shoulder. He grips the knight's face with mana-filled hands. Tiny mocks him, saying he is not going to kill him. A moment later, he knocks him to the ground. Tiny declares that knights are not that special. Everyone is stunned, and whispers spread as they watch a knight lose to a child. Cran narrows his eyes at him. It was all part of Tiny's plan. He succeeded in defeating a knight in front of everyone without even summoning his familiar. He did it to prove his talent, knowing that such rare ability would stop the Lord from killing him. This way, his plan can still succeed. Suddenly, he feels a sharp pain through his body, causing him to stagger. He steadies himself before falling, wondering if he pushed himself too far. During the fight, he used all his mana to strike Grant when his guard dropped. It was the only way to beat him since Grant was far above his level. In his previous life, he struggled whenever he used such a method because his mana body could restore his physical body, but mana recovered slowly. Now that his mana and body are synchronized, he no longer has that problem. This also makes his training much easier. He resolves to grow far stronger. Later, he is invited to dine with the Lord. He learns that Esgard has already made his move. At the table, T-Man admits that he judged him too quickly. Tiny thanks him for trusting his ability after confirming it. The maid serves the food. T-Man tells him it is steak from a young calf. He also prepared many other dishes for him. Tiny remarks that meat is rather heavy for breakfast. T-Man seems surprised, knowing that Tiny gained the strength to defeat his knight through all the food he ate. Tiny brushes it off, saying Grant only lost because he lowered his guard. T-Man notes his humility, then says it is unfortunate that there is no suitable teacher to train someone like Tiny. Tiny responds that most knights in history became stronger on their own without a teacher. T-Man listens closely. Then he remarks that Tiny not only knows history, but also has proper table manners. Tiny cannot understand what T-Man is implying. He cannot say that he learned all of this as an adult in his previous life. T-Man clearly assumes Tiny may be a noble, but nobles with black hair and black eyes are rare in their empire and even in neighboring empires. However, there is one place where such a thing is possible. Tiny is completely confused, while T-Man grows excited by his own conclusion. Tiny could become a valuable asset. He still has no idea what T-Man is talking about. T-Man mentions that he has already reported everything about Tiny to someone. That person is pleased with Tiny's progress. Meanwhile, Tiny, still confused, thinks about T-Man's future and how he will eventually fall into drug addiction. At present, T-Man has a double circle as a dark mage. When the time comes for the demon to claim him, his aid will not abandon him either. T-Man continues, saying that Tiny will become important to that person, hinting that they are extremely powerful. Tiny pretends to be thankful for the opportunity. Later, Tiny intensifies his training. He assumes that this person and their group will be powerful. For now, his main concern is defeating T-Man and his commander. T-Man is a 2-circle mage, while Jean is a stage 2 skill fighter. Cran may be stronger than Timon, but they are nearly equal, judging by how mana users and mages advance through similar stages. In his previous life, Tiny went beyond stage 2. Now he must reach that level within 6 days. After 3 days of training, he improves his flexibility by compressing his weight and strength. Now his agility is better than it was in his previous life. As he relearns the basics, he understands his past mistakes. In his previous life, he focused on becoming larger and more muscular, believing that size meant strength. But his oversized body became a weakness because it ruined the balance between his mana body and physical body. Now he has no reason to repeat that mistake because he understands that growing bigger does not mean growing stronger. Then he hears nearby soldiers gasp. After seeing his fight with Grant, they decide to avoid him. He is pleased by their reaction. Over these 3 days, he mostly eats and trains. Meanwhile, everyone loses interest in him, which suits him perfectly. At that moment, Cran comes to escort him to the armory. He tells him that Timon wants him equipped with proper weapons and armor. Seeing Cran's sword, Tiny smiles, knowing it is time time to obtain one of his own. When they reach the armory, Kraken still reminds him to feel grateful to the Lord. Inside the armory, Tiny examines the weapons and armor. The armor sets clearly do not fit his small body. As for the weapons, there are no war hammers or maces, making all of them useless to him. Then, to provoke Kraken, Tiny mentions that he might find something like Kraken's sword. Kraken smirks and answers that his sword is not an ordinary weapon. He explains that his sword was forged by the famous weaponsmith Rogers and is now called Grius. Kraken doubts Tiny could ever wield such a blade. Hearing that, Tiny wonders how many people were sacrificed to create it. Tiny provokes Kraken by saying he is more talented and therefore more worthy of using such a high-quality sword. Kraken becomes furious after hearing that, and his roar is loud enough for the guards outside the armory to hear. Inside, Tiny challenges him to a contest to prove his point. Grabbing the sword, he raises the stakes even further, saying Kraken may kill him if he loses. Completely enraged, Kraken lifts his sword against Tiny. Outside the armory, everyone hears Tiny begging Kraken and promising that he will never do anything like this again. After some time, they see a badly injured Tiny come out. Everyone feels pity for him, assuming Kraken beat him. One guard whispers about the rumor that Kraken holds a grudge against Tiny because he wants to become the new commander. The maid quietly says Kraken went too far, even if he dislikes Tiny. In any case, they decide to leave him alone. As he moves on, other maids also see him in that state. He tells them the same story, blaming Kraken. They tell him to rest. Inside Timon's chamber, the butler serves him wine. Timon asks about the sacrifices. The butler reports that everything is prepared. Timon asks whether Wolf's men are being used as sacrifices again, and his subordinate confirms it. Timon thinks about how Tiny ruined the invader. He dismisses his servant while thinking about Tiny. Overall, he still knows little about the boy's true intentions, but he can still make good use of him. Once his guest arrives, he will be able to confirm Tiny's bloodline. The problem is that if his suspicions are wrong and Tiny does not belong to that specific family, his superiors will be displeased about what happened with Wolf. Then both Tiny and Timon, as Wolf's supervisor, will stand on the edge of punishment. Still, he reassures himself by reviewing what he knows about Tiny. From his table manners to the strength needed to defeat a knight, no commoner could possess that, no matter how talented. Timon is convinced Tiny comes from the prestigious family he suspects. The last piece of suspicion is supported by Tiny's black hair and black eyes. He is satisfied with the evidence. As he lies down and thinks about his guest's arrival, he suddenly senses an alarm through his magic. He wakes with an irritated expression, determined to sacrifice whoever disturbed his sleep. The next instant, he sees Tiny drive Kraken's sword into him. Before he can grasp what happened, he dies. Tiny leaves him there. The next morning, the maid who comes to wake Tiny screams after finding him dead. Later, Rum arrives to investigate as well. He is stunned to discover that Timon was a dark mage. He confirms it with the remaining priest. They sense the dark energy and prepare to report it to the parish. Gren adds that the royal investigation team will also arrive soon. Everyone notices that his body looks as if it has been dead for weeks. That is because a dark mage's body decays faster. Gren wonders why Timon chose the dark path, especially when he was already corrupt. But thinking about it is pointless now, since Timon is already dead. Another issue is that the murder weapon, the sword, belongs to the commander. Rum does not want to believe it. Later, the guards begin discussing how Kraken resented Tiny because the boy had gained the Lord's favor. They even suggest that Tiny might have become the next commander, which would explain why Kraken was so furious. Still, they struggle to believe that a commander would commit such a thing over a promotion. The main question now is where Kraken has gone. Gren turns to his subordinates and orders them to begin the investigation at once. They start questioning the guards and maids about the events of the previous day. Everyone says they saw Tiny being beaten by the commander. Hearing that, Gren demands to see Tiny. Later, during questioning, Tiny repeats the same account. Kraken took him to the armory the day before and then began hitting him. Gren does not fully believe it because after that meeting with Tiny, nobody has seen Kraken anywhere. They search the warehouse as well, but he is not there. Gren asks whether Tiny has seen him since that incident. Gren continues the investigation, but Tiny denies seeing the commander after yesterday. Then Gren asks whether anything unusual happened. Tiny replies that the commander opposed him becoming the next leader. Hearing this, Gren is satisfied because the story matches the witnesses' statements. Then Tiny innocently asks what will happen to the future the Lord had secured for him. Gren orders him to come to him tomorrow. After going outside, Tiny starts wondering about Gren's identity because he does not remember him from his previous life when he faced the Lord's corrupt knights. He wonders if he simply forgot Gren, but dismisses the idea because he remembers every soldier he defeated. He finds it strange that Gren wants to meet him tomorrow, so he decides to to stay careful. The next morning, he is surprised by Gren's kindness when the man gives him a mercenary card and some money. As a commoner, this will help Tiny move freely between territories, since only knights or mercenaries can usually travel that way. Gren is vouching for him. Tiny asks why he is giving him these things. Gren replies that someone with Tiny's talent should achieve something greater, which this place cannot provide. Tiny wonders if Gren is actually saying that to himself. That explains why he does not remember him. Gren probably left this place in his previous life as well. Tiny thanks him and adds that he was planning to leave anyway. He knows the Imperial investigation team will arrive soon once they discover that Timon was a dark mage. The guest may not come, but this will also prevent Esgard from arriving here. For Tiny, it is better to go and find him personally. Gren ends the conversation by saying he expects Tiny to remember his name once he becomes successful. He is slightly surprised when the boy asks what his name is, so Gren introduces himself anyway. Tiny replies that he hopes Gren will remember his name too. After that, he leaves the place. He knows everything now depends on Gren, who must manage Phil's estate as commander after the Lord's death. However, Gren is in a difficult position as he tries to investigate the case and find the commander. He already plans to hire a specialized mage to track Kraken. Tiny feels bad for him, but cannot change the situation. He plans to buy a horse from a guild using his mercenary card. Reading his thoughts, Walling appears in front of him and offers to carry Tiny. Tiny points out that staying on his back during a long trip may be difficult. He recalls how his orc friend once mocked humans, saying they cannot ride dire wolves because they would vomit during the ride. Supposedly, only orcs can manage it because of their warped sense of balance. But when Walling insists, Tiny decides to try. He is pleased to see that Walling has a solid build in his physical form. Spirit beasts usually appear as large as they were in life when in spirit form, but their physical size depends on the skill level of their spirit mage. Suddenly, he realizes that he needs to connect his soul to Walling and synchronize with his senses. He decides to try. He succeeds and uses his second stage spirit mage power to connect his soul with Walling. He notices a change in Walling's body. He remembers Estina once explaining that advancing as a spirit mage allows a familiar to receive part of the mage's abilities. Now he can tell that Walling's physical form has become sturdier and stronger, which proves the strength of his abilities. A moment later, Walling shoots forward like the wind. With their souls connected, Tiny realizes his senses have become much sharper. He can feel every movement during the journey, see through Walling's eyes, and even smell what Walling smells. He hopes this will let him reach Valentino quickly. In the future, it will also help him travel to distant places like Karun, the kingdom where the first disaster will occur. In his previous life, disasters began spreading across the continent one after another, as if warning them of the demon army's arrival. Those events weakened the human military and its forces. It all began when the sacred relic in Karun vanished. Tiny must stop that from happening. In simple terms, the 7 sacred relics are holy artifacts granted by the goddess, serving as humanity's final line of defense. After Karun's relic was stolen, the rest were eventually taken as well. This time, Tiny plans to prevent it. To do that, he must grow stronger so he can face the demon army at full strength. He intends to go to Karun as soon as he meets Esgard. Meanwhile, people in Invader gossip about the Imperial army arriving to investigate. They discuss Timon's murder and the discovery that he was a dark mage. At the gate of Timon's mansion, a mysterious figure appears. The guards demand her identification, but with a single snap of her fingers, she knocks them unconscious. She then goes inside and finds Gren. Gren immediately becomes wary, but she enchants him with another snap of her fingers. She demands an explanation for the Lord's murder, and Gren tells her everything he knows. She asks where the Lord's corpse is kept. Gren answers that the Imperial investigation team ordered it placed in a casket inside the bedroom. The stranger then commands Gren to sleep for 1 hour. An hour later, Gren suddenly wakes up. He remembers nothing about the encounter and assumes he simply dozed off from overwork. At that moment, a panicked guard reports that Timon's corpse has disappeared. Gren curses, since the body was their only key lead for uncovering the truth behind the black magic. That same mysterious person is now in a forest outside Philly's estate. She examines Cran's sword to investigate the murder. She senses that the sword's owner is dead. Because of that, she concludes that Tiny must be the one behind the wolf deaths. She decides to make Tiny pay for ruining her organization's plan. Meanwhile, Tiny enters Licentia through the western gate. He notices that many people are heading toward Valentino. So far, everything is going smoothly, but he knows the mysterious person may disturb his peace soon. Because of that, he decides to buy new equipment as quickly as possible. He checks his money and sees that he has only 2 gold coins. He is grateful to Gren for giving them to him, but he knows this amount is not enough for what he needs. Suddenly, two thugs appear and demand his money. One of them threatens him again, telling him to hand it over while they are still being polite. Instead of being afraid, Tiny asks whether they have any money on them. In his previous life, he was known as a giant of the underworld. People there had a rule that if they saw his shadow in an alley, they had to hide at once. He remembers how, while disposing of some thugs, a priest once lectured him that killing so many people would stain his soul. The priest insisted he should show mercy to lessen his guilt. Tiny replied that he was not killing anyone. He was simply taking out the trash. Now he has defeated both thugs from the Lupus family. Everyone is stunned, since they are rumored to be as strong as knights. Tiny remarks that they are rather weak. Angered, both of them charge at him. However, he throws his pouch at them with full force, causing one to trip over the other. Then he jumps into the air and kicks them. After that, he robs the thugs. They threaten him, saying their boss will hunt him down, but he ignores them. Tiny smiles because he now has their money, including a decent number of gold coins. With that money, he goes to a blacksmith to look for equipment. He examines armor that the shopkeeper says is made from the hide of an iron bull from the southern mountains. Can help deflect arrows. Tiny admits the armor and weapons are good. Then he overhears some people talking about a beautiful lady. He asks the shopkeeper what is happening. The shopkeeper says Lady Valencia will personally patrol today. Tiny remembers that although Irina was the first to give him love and kindness, Khloe was the one who gave him hope. But things with Irina did not end well. He hopes that if Khloe acknowledges him, he will know he is managing to live the way Irina wanted him to. In his previous life, his body had grown so massive by the time he approached Khloe that she failed to recognize him. This time, however, not much time has passed. She should still remember him, so he rushes forward, hoping for a chance to meet Asgard. Meanwhile, Khloe is being guided around by Edmund von Lucent, the eldest son of Count Lucent. He proudly explains that the city is one of the largest in the central region. He shows her its notable places, going into long explanations about each location. Suddenly, she asks to visit the slums instead of the commercial district. Her request leaves him stunned. She replies that the people living there are also citizens of the country. Nervously, he agrees and steps forward to lead the way. Inwardly, she wonders why everyone reacts this way whenever she makes such requests. Edmund should understand his duty toward the people, especially since he was raised as an heir. Her father always taught her that if the working class prospers, the kingdom will prosper as well. She wonders whether his teachings were unusual compared to other nobles. She wants to change how people think, but knows she will lose much of her freedom once she is engaged. She considers devoting herself to the temple, as its people want her to join them. However, that would sadden her father, who does not want her to spend the rest of her life alone. At that moment, she notices Tiny trying to approach, but the guards stop him. Edmund also wonders how Tiny appeared so suddenly. Tiny shows the ring Khloe gave him and claims that she was the one who entrusted it to him. He immediately bows and reminds her of the words she once said about finding her. He thanks her on the spot. Looking at the ring, she recognizes it, but still fails to recognize him. She remembers giving the ring to someone in a slum, but since Tiny now looks like a noble, she cannot understand how he obtained it. Tiny is genuinely shocked to hear that. Meanwhile, the guards point their weapons at him. Khloe's personal knight, Vivian, demands an explanation from him. Tiny silently curses himself for rushing to meet her. Still, he insists that he is the same child she once gave the ring to. Khloe is startled by this, but Tiny expected that reaction, since he has grown much stronger since their last meeting. To prove it, he points to his black hair and reminds her that he is the only person with that color in the entire duchy. Khloe accepts the explanation, but cannot understand how he changed so much. Before, he was a small, frail child who could barely speak. In truth, Wolf had made him look that way so he would seem like a more believable beggar. When Khloe mentions how tiny he used to be, Tiny remembers that she has a weakness for small and cute things. To win her over, he summons Walling in a small and adorable physical form. Khloe is instantly charmed by how cute he looks. Vivian warns her that Walling is still the spirit of a stranger. Khloe argues that only children with pure hearts can form contracts with spirits. She accepts that point but remains cautious of the boy, since he is not only carrying a weapon but also happens to be a spirit contractor. Khloe asks for the familiar's name. Tiny explains that he named him Walling, meaning Moonlight Wolf in an Eastern language. The knight is surprised that he knows an Eastern tongue. Khloe praises the name. She did not expect him to change so much in only 2 months. He looks barely 10 years old, yet she remembers that his name meant something small. He explains that he is 13 and that his name is Tiny, adding that awakening his mana sped up his growth. At last, Khloe remembers him. However, Vivian still finds him too suspicious. She asks whether he has mixed blood. Khloe objects, but Vivian reminds her that protecting her is her duty. Edmund agrees, agrees, saying he also finds Tiny suspicious and suggests isolating him for questioning. Ignoring them, Tiny says he does not care whether anyone else believes him. He only reminds Khloe of her promise to help him once he found her. She remembers that promise and asks what he wants. He answers that he wants to meet Asgard. Now all the guards and Vivian turn hostile toward him for making such a bold demand. Without losing his composure, Tiny reasons with them and asks whether they truly believe he could harm someone like Asgard. After all, Asgard is the legendary swordmaster, one of the 7 strongest knights on the continent, with the ability to wield destructive power and aura. Khloe smiles and says her father would feel embarrassed being called a swordmaster, since he was only recently recognized as one of the continent's strongest knights. Tiny breaks into a sweat when he realizes Asgard has not actually become a swordmaster in this timeline yet. She dismisses his remark, saying the title will suit Asgard well regardless. Besides, the guards are pleased to hear their leader praised so highly. Tiny notices that his words had a positive effect. At last, he reveals that he wants to meet Asgard to tell him about the incident in Phillies, since he is one of the people connected to it. Later, Khloe and Vivian discuss what Tiny told Vivian about the Phillies incident. Khloe suspects her guard is hiding something from her. Vivian assures her that she repeated everything exactly as Tiny explained it. Timon was a dark mage, and someone else was behind him. Khloe agrees that his testimony may lead them to the true mastermind. However, she also sees it as a reason to return home, since he wants to meet her father. Vivian warns that Wooling could be dangerous, especially with how close Khloe allows him to get. Khloe dismisses her concern, saying he cannot hurt her when he is so small and cute. Vivian also finds him adorable, but decides to remain cautious anyway. Then Khloe asks where Tiny is. Vivian answers that Edmund took him away, claiming he had business with him. Khloe wonders what kind of business Edmund could have with him. Suddenly, Wooling vanishes from her lap. Meanwhile, Edmund leads Tiny away under the pretense of having information about the dark mage. Instead, he lectures Tiny about knowing his place. Tiny cuts him off and goes straight to the point. He wants information about the dark mage. Edmund admits he knows nothing about the dark mage. It was only an excuse to bring Tiny there. He wants to teach him manners and raises his hand to slap him for forgetting his place, but Tiny catches his wrist. Edmund is furious at the insolence, but his words stop when Tiny squeezes his hand so tightly that he cannot break free. Edmund threatens to report his disrespect toward a noble to Khloe. Tiny pretends not to understand, saying he does not know what a noble is. Then he tells Edmund to do whatever he wants and challenges him to show whether he has any real backbone. Tiny suspects he has some hidden support. Edmund gladly accepts the challenge and tells Tiny to follow him. Meanwhile, Vivian heads out to search for Tiny. As soon as Wooling vanishes, they immediately realize that Edmund must have taken Tiny too far away, since a spirit cannot stay far from its master over a long distance. She rushes forward while praying that she reaches Tiny before it is too late. Meanwhile, Edmund grins, thinking he may finally teach the boy a lesson. Tiny still looks bored. Edmund brings him to the Lupus family headquarters. The thugs recognize him immediately and ask why he has come so suddenly. They assume he is there to inspect the goods they prepared for him as bribes. Tiny is disappointed when he sees them. Edmund, however, only wants the gang to teach the boy a lesson. The men are stunned when they ask whether he really wants them to beat a child. Edmund slaps Lupus for daring to answer him back. Understanding the message, Lupus orders his men to take Tiny outside. These are the same men Tiny had already defeated, so they freeze in terror the moment they recognize him. Lupus grows furious at their fear and orders them to move. They argue that Tiny is the one who destroyed them before, then leave Lupus to handle him himself. Lupus prepares to attack, and Edmund becomes excited when he sees him so eager. But to his shock, Lupus's attack is easily blocked. A moment later, Tiny drives Lupus back with such force that he crashes into the ground. Edmund is horrified by the sudden turn of events, and frantically orders Lupus to protect him. Tiny coldly challenges Lupus to protect Edmund if he can. In the next instant, both of them pass out from pure fear. Tiny expected more from the boss. With a smirk, he turns toward the underlings, who are also shaking in terror. Sometime later, Vivian rushes into the headquarters to rescue Tiny. She freezes at the scene before her, especially after seeing Edmund's condition. Tiny calmly asks why she came. Vivian explains that Khloe sent her. Then she asks about the book he is reading. He gives it to her, explaining that it contains proof of Edmund's bribes. He also adds that they are connected to human trafficking. Tiny is sure that with the ledger in Vivian's hands, Edmund will no longer be able to prove his innocence. Vivian wonders what kind of life the boy has lived until now. The next day, Edmund is banished from the Count's territory for his crimes. For a long time, he had been running a human trafficking operation with the Lupus gang. The Count had no choice but to exile his own son to protect the family name. Vivian apologizes for the trouble. Khloe asks whether Vivian truly thinks she did anything wrong. Tiny adds that he does not feel sorry at all. Khloe laughs at that. She says that regardless of status, good deeds must be acknowledged and crimes must be punished. That is what her father taught her. Vivian does not understand why Khloe still looks disappointed in her. Khloe explains that Vivian failed to beat Edmund properly before he escaped. Tiny finally understands the bond between them. Khloe, the famous youngest daughter of Asgard, and Vivian, her sword prodigy guard, make an unusual pair. They have stayed together even as Khloe's circumstances changed. It is amusing for Tiny to see Khloe acting like the older one when she is actually younger than Vivian. Noticing his expression, Khloe asks what he is thinking about. He answers that since Edmund was so proud of his noble status, he deserved punishment regardless of it. Hearing that, Vivian again wonders whether he is truly just a child. Then Khloe begins playing with Walling. She even gives the familiar the nickname Wool because using his full name feels too troublesome for her. Seeing how casually she behaves, Tiny asks whether she ever doubted him. She answers that she has already heard rumors about him destroying Wolf's organization and freeing its victims, and now he has exposed Edmund as well. He is relieved to see that she believes him. Khloe, however, warns him to tell her everything before acting next time, and he agrees without hesitation. 3 days later, during their journey, the driver stops the carriage. They are told that an elf has asked to travel with them, which surprises everyone. The elf introduces herself as Irina, a servant of the World Tree. Both girls are instantly captivated by her beauty and manners. Tiny, however, immediately sees the truth. Irina is actually a five-circle dark mage. In Tiny's world, elves are descendants of fairies and usually live in Elfenheim, far to the west. Seeing one in the central region of the Azran Empire is extremely rare. Aside from their beauty, elves are known as peaceful and kind-hearted people. That is why Tiny is so confused to see an elf who is also a five-circle dark mage. Irina explains to Khloe that she is passing through Valentino territory on her way to the Werbeast Kingdom in the north. She asks whether her destination makes them uneasy, since the Empire and the Werbeast Kingdom are always in conflict. Khloe dismisses the concern and instead asks why Irina is traveling such a long distance. Irina explains that it is for training. Khloe immediately assumes she is training to become an elite warrior. Irina confirms it, but she seems far more interested in finding the spirit's owner. Khloe explains that Walling belongs to Tiny. When Irina sees him, she remarks that meeting a human spirit mage is rare. Tiny, however, has already realized that she is the guest Timon was waiting for. He never expected her to be this strong. Since he cannot fight her right now, he pretends to be completely amazed, acting as if he has never seen an elf before. Both girls are surprised by his behavior. He notices they are not playing along, but the good thing is that Irina cannot sense Walling's true strength. As his owner, only Tiny knows his full potential. He even curses how well she hides such powerful magic. Meanwhile, Irina shows Tiny some magic. He can see the mana flowing from her body. It reminds him of Argon's lesson about sensing mana and distinguishing its types, a lesson he mostly ignored in his previous life. To better understand his position against someone like Irina, he begins comparing everyone's strength. They currently have 12 third-stage expert rank knights and 1 4th-stage blade rank knight, meaning Vivian. In simple terms, a mage's circles correspond to a mana user's stages. Since they have 1 4th-stage warrior, they would need 5 fighters of the same stage to defeat Irina. In other words, it would take 100 lower-level people to bring her down. He realizes he must create a plan to defeat her, which means striking when she lets her guard down. Besides, he has a hidden weapon. The next moment, Walling jumps from Khloe's lap to Vivian's. Irina comments on how adorable Walling is and asks whether she can hold him too. Tiny asks if she is certain, and she immediately agrees. But before she can take him, Walling changes into a massive wolf. Irina instantly forms a shield to defend herself. At that exact moment, Vivian drives her blade toward Irina's side. Every knight is shocked to see dark energy coming from her. Her true identity as a dark mage is finally exposed. She wonders how they discovered it. Khloe, meanwhile, is relieved that she trusted the boy. A short while earlier, he had used Walling to tell her that Irina was a dark mage. He needed Vivian's help, but Khloe pointed out that her position was complicated, since this could create trouble for the Empire. Tiny explained that Irina was the true mastermind behind the Philly incident, and that letting her go would endanger everyone. He told her he was risking his life on this. That was why Walling jumped onto Vivian's lap to explain everything to her as well. Back in the present, Irina flies back from them. Vivian curses because she failed to hit her heart. Irina immediately surrounds herself with a shield. Vivian orders her knights to attack in order to protect Khloe, and Tiny joins the assault. However, her shield shield repels him. Irina strikes the knights, and Vivian with magic, clearly angered that they uncovered her identity. Tiny mocks her, saying the stench of her dark magic hurts his nose. Furious that he caused this situation, Irina forms powerful explosive magic between her hands. A moment later, a massive explosion erupts. Tiny immediately activates his divine steel armor together with iron body to shield himself from the blast. The force throws him back, but he survives. It is the first time he has used the skill in his new life, and it works. Vivian orders her knights to kill Irina, noticing that her shield is finally weakening. Irina furiously attacks them again with dark magic. Tiny climbs onto Walling, and the two charge forward. He smashes his weapon against her shield, and while Irina is distracted by his assault, Vivian and her knights attack from behind. Irina threatens them, saying that at first she only intended to kill Tiny, but now she will destroy all of them. Vivian answers her challenge, declaring that they will not allow that, as she strikes the shield again. Tiny follows with another attack, but both of them are pushed back once more. They understand this may be their only chance, yet her shield still holds. Irina also realizes she must use her full power now and deal with the consequences later. With her magic, she creates a violent tremor in the ground. Vivian is horrified when she sees that the attack is aimed directly at Khloe. She instantly throws herself in front of Khloe to block it, shouting for everyone to hold on. Suddenly, she is stunned to see Tiny charging straight toward Irina despite her constant fire attacks. In truth, Tiny is shielding himself from the flames with his divine steel armor. This skill has improved greatly together with his secret growth technique. He signals Vivian to attack now while he crashes into the shield again, determined to weaken it as much as possible. They both attack once more. Tiny is excited when he finally sees a crack in Irina's shield, but a moment later, a second explosion shakes the area, throwing them both back with brutal force. Though Irina is clearly wounded and exhausted, the successful strike gives the group more confidence. They rush in again to keep pressuring her, while Vivian charges from the opposite side to close the distance. Furious that anyone would dare attack an elf, Irina unleashes a stream of blazing magic. The overwhelming force leaves Vivian struggling, making her wonder how much power the mage still has left, only for her to be shocked when Tiny charges straight through the flames. By protecting both himself and his familiar with his armor, he closes the gap until he is directly in front of Irina. Then he strikes her the next second. Noticing that Irina is finally trying to retreat, Vivian orders her knights to finish her off, but the trapped mage chooses a desperate final move, sacrificing her own life to greatly amplify her magic. As she prepares to release a huge fire spell capable of burning everything down, the battlefield falls into chaos as everyone rushes to find cover. Retreating from the area of the coming blast, Tiny realizes the knights are completely exhausted, so it is up to him to find a way to nullify her power once and for all. He calls out to Khloe, telling her that he has bought enough time and that this is her chance. Vivian protects her while Khloe gathers her mana. The next moment, Khloe begins chanting. Khloe possesses holy power, something usually granted only after years of penance and divine blessing. Normally, a person must earn the right to become a priest, receive baptism, and master holy power before finally awakening the ability to destroy evil. Khloe, however, is among the rare few born with this power, known as natural clerics. Seeing the knights' shocked reactions, Tiny realizes even they did not know she was a cleric. The Valencia family must have hidden it so Khloe would not be forced to abandon marriage for the priesthood. Tiny can tell her power has not reached its full potential yet, but it is still enough to repel dark magic and defeat Irina. A moment later, Khloe's attack strikes Irina directly. The elf cannot believe she has been defeated by a mere human. Tiny steps forward to finish her off, since everyone else is worn out, but Khloe stops him. She explains that Irina must be kept alive for interrogation. She points out that even as a cleric, she could not sense Irina's dark energy and wants to learn how that was possible. Tiny apologizes for trying to finish her. Khloe wonders whether she should heal Irina before questioning her, but she quickly understands that it is already too late. The dark mage is dead. The knights are truly impressed when they learn their lady is a cleric. Khloe looks at Tiny and notes that he does not seem surprised, which means he had already realized it. Tiny admits that he knew. Khloe is startled, since only her family is supposed to know this secret. Tiny explains that he cannot tell her how he knows for now, but promises to explain everything someday. To his surprise, she accepts that without pressing him further. Tiny then explains that Irina came after him because of certain incidents he was involved in before meeting them. Khloe guesses those incidents must be like the one with Edmund, and Tiny confirms it. He admits that he worries she may be put in danger because of him, but Khloe dismisses his concern. She says eliminating demon followers is her duty worthy as a noble. If she dies, it only means she was too weak, so Tiny should not blame himself. He decides to accept her reasoning. Seeing his worried expression, Khloe guesses he may be anxious about her reaction. She finds his face cute and says he is finally acting his age. Vivian joins in, teasing him non-stop for being adorable. While they joke around, Khloe mentions that they must report the incident to her father. She decides to send an official report once they reach the nearest city. When they arrive at the front gates of T-Bon, they encounter something completely unexpected. Tiny already knows Asgard cares deeply for his daughter, but the man clearly goes too far by sending the Blue Wing Knights to welcome them. Khloe is visibly embarrassed by the display. The Blue Wing Knights are the elite force of Valencia. Each of them holds a rank higher than expert. Their vice captain, Garen, bows to Khloe together with his 100 men. Khloe thanks them politely, but when Garen says her father has been worried, she shows irritation that he sent so many knights just to protect her. Garen reminds her that her father has every reason to worry, especially after she was attacked by a dark mage. He adds that the Lord was busy with an emergency, which is why he could not come in person. When Khloe asks what happened, Garen explains that a month and a half earlier, the family heirloom, Tempest, disappeared. As Khloe says her father always kept it with him, Tiny realizes what Tempest truly is. He carefully asks Khloe whether the heirloom is an artifact. Khloe is not completely sure, since the secrets of Tempest are passed only to the family head. She simply believes it is a powerful artifact. Tiny, however, finally understands the truth. He tells the group that he knows exactly how it disappeared. Everyone is shocked. Instead of explaining it on the spot, he demands to meet the Lord himself, insisting that he will tell him directly. After hearing Tiny's claim, Garen begins wondering who this child really is. The knights tell him that Tiny played a key role in defeating the Dark Mage. When Garen learns that Tiny is close to expert rank, he is utterly stunned. Even the legendary 7 knights never reached that level so young. It is an achievement beyond ordinary genius. Garen is already eager to recruit him, but then he suddenly recalls where he heard the name before. Tiny is the one who sent the letter about File's incident. Khloe is delighted to return to her hometown. Seeing the lilac fields around them, Tiny asks whether she likes the flowers. She answers that she does, adding that her parents loved them so much they called her Lilac when she was a baby. Vivian mentions how deeply Asgard loves his wife, and that triggers Tiny's memory. In his previous life, Asgard's final words included that he had never liked those flowers. Tiny now understands that back then, Asgard did not know his real identity. That is why the Lord told him to find him quickly in this life so he could train him properly. Tiny is determined to become an aura master once he begins learning under Asgard. He knows he must reach the next level soon. Without aura, he will not even be able to wound the higher-ranking members of the demon army. He is resolved to wipe out every last one of them. After some time, they arrive at Valentino, the largest city in the Azran Empire. The knights are pleased to return home. Khloe asks Tiny whether he has ever been there, and he carefully replies that it is his first time in this life. Before she can ask him what he means, her father rushes in to hug her. Khloe steps aside, making him fall face first to the ground. She scolds him, telling him to protect his reputation and apologize to the knights for all the trouble he caused. The Lord quickly regains his composure and thanks his knights for bringing his daughter back safely, telling them to enjoy the feast he prepared. At last, he notices Tiny and asks who he is. Khloe reminds him that Tiny was mentioned in her report about important information on the Dark Mages. The Lord apologizes, saying he has been overwhelmed lately. Then, shocking everyone, Tiny tells the Lord that he knows where Tempest is. Hearing that, the Lord warns him that making such a claim takes serious nerve. He releases his soul pressure against the boy. Tiny realizes that the Lord has not yet reached the Swordmaster level. He has only recently become a skilled aura user. Tiny remembers his old comrades, Estina, who became an aura expert, and Yarrick, who was close to that level. Tiny easily resists the pressure with the soul energy he gathered in his previous life. Tiny asks whether the Lord truly wants him to reveal everything in front of so many people. Khloe immediately apologizes for him, assuming that because he is a child, he does not know any better. Asgard, however, understands that Tiny knows exactly what he is doing. He decides it is better to speak with him privately. Once they are finally alone, Asgard goes straight to the point and asks where Tempest is. Tiny explains that he has a theory. Asgard remains doubtful, but wants to hear his assumption. Tiny knows that Tempest is one of the few high-level artifacts in existence. He knows the name means time or opportunity. Choosing not to avoid the subject, he looks Asgard in the eyes and speaks directly. He asks whether Tempest has the power to reverse time. Understanding what he means, Asgard asks him to explain further. Tiny describes the coming disaster, a massive catastrophe that will occur 20 years in the future. After hearing the the scale of what is coming, Asgard realizes this is not something a child could simply invent. He is especially stunned that Tiny knows the names of the guardians of the world tree, the dwarf's strongest hammer, and the orc's greatest warrior. Tiny confirms the truth. They were his comrades in his previous life. Asgard finally admits that Tempest can indeed send someone back through time, but only by consuming the life force of a powerful person. When he first inherited the artifact, he was told about both its function and the dangers of using it. At the time, however, he never truly believed it would work. Now he accepts the truth. He really did send Tiny back. However, he admits that he doubts his own future judgment, wondering why he would place such a burden on someone like Tiny. Tiny is completely stunned by this. Asgard realizes he could have used the artifact on himself and returned to the past. With his status, experience, and knowledge of the future, he could have prepared a massive army and crushed the Demon Lord's forces before they even began. He cannot understand why his future self chose Tiny, instead of taking that responsibility himself. Tiny is left wondering as well. Tiny answers honestly that the future Asgard clearly knew why he chose him, and that it had something to do with nurturing his talent. Back then, Tiny had actually thought Asgard had lost his mind. Asgard accepts the explanation, but adds that he had not known exactly how far back Tiny would be sent. Tiny is shocked to realize Asgard used a time travel artifact without fully understanding its limits. Asgard explains that he had never used it before, but he was certain Tiny would be sent back to a moment in his life that completely shook him, the moment he finally understood who he was. As Tiny processes this, his expression darkens when he realizes that this exact moment was the death of his sister. Seeing the change in his mood, Asgard carefully asks whether sending him to that moment was a mistake, but Tiny only shakes his head. He knows it is not the Lord's fault, and instead feels grateful for the chance to see his sister one final time. However, the Lord still has one more thing to verify. He asks whether Tiny can provide any other proof, something so certain that it would be impossible to deny. Understanding how serious the request is, Tiny prepares his answer. He tells Asgard that Khloe's name is Lilac, taken from her mother's favorite flower. When Asgard says that everyone knows this, Tiny reveals the true detail. The important part is that Asgard himself actually hates those flowers. Hearing this, Asgard bursts into laughter. He admits that Tiny is telling the truth. He never had the courage to tell his wife how he truly felt about them, and now that she is gone, there is no reason to say it. He curses quietly, caught between wanting to cry and feeling relieved now that he must accept this terrible future. Tiny is simply glad that he is believed, though he notices that the younger Asgard has quite a temper. Suddenly, the Lord calls for one of his knights, Royer. Asgard surprises Tiny by explaining that although his future self may have trusted him, the current Asgard does not know him at all. He demands that Tiny demonstrate the talent his future self valued so highly. Tiny becomes eager, ready to prove himself. However, once they step outside, he realizes something. It is rather unfair for the Lord to test his talent this way, especially when the future Asgard was the one who told him to hurry and find him. To provoke him, Tiny proudly asks whether the Lord wants to know anything about the future. Naturally, he expects him to agree. However, Tiny is surprised when the Lord answers that he has no interest in his personal future. The only thing that matters to him is the disaster ahead. He firmly forbids Tiny from telling him or his children about their private lives, explaining that people truly grow only through their own mistakes and failures. He is sure Khloe will face her own trials, and he does not want Tiny to take away her chance to mature. Tiny casually admits that he does not know much about Asgard or Khloe anyway. Back then, he was busy surviving, so he had no time to follow their personal lives. Asgard is visibly stunned, grabbing Tiny and shaking him while demanding to know whether he really has knowledge of the world's future. Tiny explains that he knows the major disturbances and upheavals that affected the people, at least to a considerable degree. When Tiny asks what else he wants, the Lord explains that Tiny has only mentioned a few people. He wants to know what happened in between. When Tiny looks confused, Asgard decides he will have to beat some sense into the boy to help him remember. Later, as the Lord reviews the information Tiny provided, his expression turns sour. He is clearly displeased that, out of the 10 major disasters destined to happen, Tiny remembers only a frustratingly small amount. Tiny nervously explains his lack of detail, admitting that most of his knowledge came from hearsay, rumors, and casual remarks from his companions. Seeing the Lord's reaction, Tiny wishes he could grow up faster so Asgard would treat him as an equal. Asgard notes that the only truly useful information Tiny gave is the Oracle's prophecy about a warrior and a saint ending the war. Assuming those people should be around 20 years old by now, the Lord plans to recruit and train them immediately. Tiny nervously points out that they may not even have been born yet. This becomes the last straw. Asgard is completely frustrated and calls Tiny utterly useless. When the butler says he has summoned Royer, Asgard changes his decision and orders him to bring Drexler instead. He wants Drexler to give Tiny a proper lesson. As a result, the boy now stands before Drexler Anon, vice captain of the Blue Wing Knights and a powerful 5th stage warrior. Drexler greets him, but becomes visibly confused when the Lord asks him to test Tiny's abilities. He begins falling into a small, existential crisis, wondering whether he is being demoted. His gloomy thoughts are interrupted by Asgard's voice, ordering him to observe Tiny carefully during their sparring match. Now facing the boy, Drexler tries to understand who he really is. As he studies Tiny's mana, he is stunned. Tiny has already reached the 2nd stage and is close to expert rank, despite looking no older than 10. Tiny, meanwhile, is distracted. He is thinking about the craftsman who made his weapon and finds it impressive. When he starts imagining a larger and better weapon, Asgard snaps at him to take this seriously. He warns Tiny that if he loses focus, he will forget every promise he made. Then Asgard tells Drexler not to hold back, as long as he does not actually kill the child. He turns to Tiny and makes his stance clear. He is not the future version who made those promises. The current Asgard must see real potential before agreeing to help him. Tiny asks whether he has to defeat Drexler to win. The Lord explains the condition. Tiny only needs to leave a single wound on the knight to claim victory. The boy accepts the challenge with a confident smile. Tiny readies his weapon. Watching from the side, Asgard observes how Tiny controls his mana. It is unusual. He realizes Tiny developed this method through his secret growth technique, proving him to be a genuine genius. Still, Asgard cannot understand why his future self chose Tiny instead of returning himself. With his own future knowledge, Asgard is sure he could have become an aura master. He believes his future self must have seen something special in this boy, and he is determined to discover what it is. He signals for them to begin the fight at full strength. Tiny immediately summons Walling, and when the knight remains still, he decides to take the initiative himself. Although Drexler instantly recognizes Walling as a spirit, he stays confident that such a summon will not be enough to defeat him. That confidence quickly wavers when Tiny startles him by dodging his first counterattack with ease. Tiny strikes back at once, but when he sees that his weapon cannot leave even one scratch, he begins wondering whether Drexler is one of those rare powerful fighters skilled in both attack and defense. Finding the boy's movements more and more interesting, Drexler stops holding back and launches a heavy strike, yet Tiny dodges again. Realizing he needs greater momentum to break through, Tiny drives his speed to the limit, leaving Drexler stunned by his sheer velocity. To counter this, the brute tightens his grip on his weapon and smashes it into the ground, breaking the earth to ruin Tiny's footing and slow him down. As Tiny jumps into the air to avoid the shockwave, he finds Drexler's hammer already swinging toward him, forcing him into a desperate narrow dodge. He notices that although the hammer is far larger than a longsword, Drexler handles it as if it weighs nothing. Tiny realizes Drexler usually fights with a shield, meaning his style relies heavily on defense. He decides to change tactics. When Drexler swings the hammer at him again, Tiny leaps high into the air once more. Drexler roars at the boy to stop darting around like a trapped animal. From the sidelines, Asgard notices that Tiny has started reading the rhythm of the battle, slipping past every heavy strike with surprising ease. Seeing this smooth evasion, Asgard begins to accept that Tiny's claim of being one of the 10 knights may not be mere arrogance. Still, even after admitting the boy has remarkable talent, Asgard remains far from satisfied. His patience finally runs out, and he shouts at Drexler to stop embarrassing him. Driven by frustration and wounded pride, Drexler charges forward with all his strength. Asgard suddenly feels alarmed as he realizes the knight is drawing on the destructive power of his soul weapon. Although Asgard understands that he must intervene immediately, his order to stop comes a moment too late. Instead of retreating to safety, Tiny charges straight into the path of the incoming attack. As Asgard wonders whether the boy has lost his mind, the air itself seems to split apart. A massive explosion bursts from the point of impact, engulfing both fighters in a blinding flash of light and force. The huge blast sends Tiny crashing to the ground. He lies there badly wounded from the impact. The sight instantly enrages Asgard, who turns his anger on Drexler. Although Drexler tries to explain that he never meant to injure him, the Lord refuses to hear excuses. He rushes to Tiny's side and scolds him for being so reckless when the goal was only to test his skill, not get him killed. Despite his broken condition, Tiny grins and insists that the result still counts as his victory. As the Lord looks at Drexler, the truth of the clash becomes clear from the outcome of their exchange. When Drexler unleashed his soul weapon, Tiny did not simply endure the blow. He counterattacked. While the force of Drexler's weapon threw Tiny to the ground, Tiny struck Drexler's face at the same time. Asgard says Tiny nearly died for an empty victory, but Tiny remains stubborn. stubborn. He explains that his entire life has been one desperate struggle after another, and without pushing himself to dangerous limits, he would never have overcome his past obstacles. His main concern is not his condition, but whether he proved his worth to the Lord. Moved by such determination, Asgard understands why his future self chose to trust him. He recognizes Tiny's resolve and promises to keep his side of the bargain by giving him exactly what he needs. Eventually, Tiny loses consciousness. He wakes up later, surprised by how fast his body is healing. The Lord is waiting for him, noting his impressive recovery speed before taking him away for a private conversation. As they walk, Tiny learns he was unconscious for half a day. He wonders whether a high-ranking priest healed him. Their walk is interrupted by an angry Khloe, who scolds her father for pulling an injured person out of bed. The Lord defends himself, saying Tiny caused those injuries himself. He reminds her that he would not deliberately hurt the person who saved her life. This comment leaves Tiny briefly confused. He believes Khloe was the one who saved him, yet the Lord seems to think otherwise. When Khloe shows concern, Tiny accepts responsibility for his own greed and apologizes for worrying her. Khloe tells him to act like the child he is, but when she gives him a genuinely surprised and grateful look, the Lord's protective instincts as a father immediately flare up. He warns Tiny not to have improper thoughts about his daughter. Tiny tries to explain that he is shocked because he was called a savior, since he remembers another timeline where he failed to defeat the dark mage. Asgard quickly stops that topic, realizing those events have not happened yet because of the time jump. He sends Khloe away so she can focus on her coming-of-age ceremony, leaving himself alone with Tiny to discuss more serious matters. She reluctantly agrees to leave. Later, Asgard gives him an important warning. Tiny must hide the fact that he is a time traveler, especially from the priesthood. He explains that time and space belong to the Creator's domain. Even the goddess cannot lawfully interfere with them. For a human to break those laws is considered the greatest sin, which is why the Valencia family keeps its secrets concealed. When Tiny questions the goddess being the supreme creator, the Lord reveals that the true scriptures, which contain the full history of the world, have been removed from public temples and are now preserved only by ancient noble families. They agree to keep Tiny's secret within a very small circle, including the knights who will become their future comrades. They also decide to leave God's hand off their list of allies. Tiny is eager to find the 10 knights of the Azran kingdom and use his knowledge of the future to train them into an overwhelming force. When the Lord tries to draw out specific future techniques, Tiny boldly reminds him that he should offer something first before demanding anything in return. He teases the Lord by calling him a forgetful old man, which earns him an immediate smack on the head. Eventually, the Lord drags Tiny outside. Before moving forward, he decides that the boy needs a lesson in respect. However, he still intends to keep his promise. He begins mentoring Tiny by introducing him to a secret growth technique passed down through the Valencia bloodline, the power to manipulate gravity. The training starts poorly when Tiny loses focus and begins snoring. His lack of attention earns him a sharp hit from Asgard, who is eager to begin the lesson. The Lord explains that the Valencia family's growth system rests on 4 foundations: mastering mana, learning a specialized sword style, gaining a stage 3 attribute, and eventually obtaining a stage 7 aura ability. Tiny realizes this complete system is exactly why the family holds such overwhelming power. Since the boy prefers the weight of a heavy warhammer over a thin sword, Asgard chooses to skip offensive swordsmanship training. Tiny thinks about his own goals, believing that if he can master the Lord's famous defensive techniques, his combat ability will become flawless. However, the Lord offers something far more tempting. He decides to teach Tiny how to obtain an attribute rather than only defensive skills. The boy does not look pleased when he hears that. Meanwhile, a mysterious group of mages gathers to discuss Elaine's death. Their leader says she was an essential tool meant to destroy the heart of Elfheim. They suspect her killer is a young descendant of the Morse family, referring to Tiny. Afraid the Empire might reach the boy first, the leader orders his subordinates to gather information on him immediately, though he stresses that their main priority is still their business with the car and kingdom. Back at the training grounds, Tiny doubts that someone can choose a specific attribute. He assumes he will naturally regain the explosive attribute from his previous life once he reaches the 3rd stage. Asgard corrects him, pointing out that although Tiny is still a child, his body has become unusually heavy because of his secret growth technique. He notes that Tiny has used heavy weapons and armor. From there, he connects weight with energy, explaining that the heavier a person or their armor is, the slower they usually move. The Lord introduces gravity, a force recognized by only a small number of mages. He explains that mastering this attribute would let Tiny turn his heavy mass into an advantage, allowing him to store enormous energy and greatly increase his strength. Asgard adds that this ability can help him gain a basic attribute at expert rank. While he keeps explaining the idea, Tiny struggles to understand the scientific theory. When the Lord describes gravity as a force that pulls objects toward the ground, Tiny rejects the explanation as nonsense, arguing that if the ground were pulling them, everyone would be glued to the floor. The argument becomes more intense as the Lord tries to explain why objects fall from high places, while Tiny dismisses it as an ordinary fact that needs no deeper thought. Frustrated by Tiny's stubbornness and lack of curiosity, the Lord decides that only direct physical experience will teach him. He drags the boy to the edge of a tall roof. At that moment, Tiny notices mana gathering in Asgard's fist. Under the threat of being dropped, Tiny finally admits that gravity may be why people fall. Despite his answer, the Lord drops him anyway, to make sure the lesson stays with him. As Tiny plummets toward the ground, he panics and activates his divine steel armor to survive the impact. He crashes straight into Wulong, who has just arrived at the scene. Asgard descends and asks whether the power of gravity is clear to him now, though Tiny is shaken and desperate for a proper verbal explanation instead. Asgard insists that repeated practical experience is necessary, and drops him several more times. Eventually, Tiny wakes up to find his chest glowing under Khloe's healing touch. She says she is surprised that he has already reached expert rank, leaving Tiny confused about when he advanced during that chaotic training. He sits in disbelief, processing the fact that he has already reached expert rank. He realizes that the terrifying experience of being repeatedly dropped from the roof by Asgard actually worked, forcing his body to adapt to the pressure of gravity. Khloe watches him and comments on her father's brutal training method. She is deeply impressed that he reached expert level. She adds that the entire Blue Wing Knight Order is buzzing with rumors about his genius. When Tiny points out that she should be busy preparing for her coming-of-age ceremony, Khloe brushes it off, saying she only has to practice basic etiquette. Tiny casually says she will handle the event well, which briefly startles her. Then she playfully smacks him. She proudly declares that she is the main figure of the day, so success is obvious. Her tone suddenly changes as she tells Tiny that since her father trained him, they are basically family now. She allows him to call her sister, which catches him off guard. Seeing his reaction, she reminds him that this is a great honor from a duke's daughter. Tiny finds the situation somewhat amusing but goes along with it. Khloe asks him to promise that their family bond will remain a secret. Before leaving, Khloe tells him that Drexler is looking for him. Sometime later, Tiny finds the knight standing in the middle of an arena, surrounded by an audience of high-ranking men. Drexler acknowledges that Tiny has reached expert status. Tiny confirms it while noticing the audience, which proves he was not called there for an ordinary reason. Suddenly, the knight drops his weapon and challenges Tiny to a hand-to-hand rematch. He admits that his performance in their previous spar was shameful for a knight of his rank and offers to help Tiny adjust to his new level of power through a revenge match. Tiny does not hesitate. He charges forward with enough force to crack the ground beneath him. The speed and weight behind his movement shock Drexler, who struggles to believe this is the same boy from a week earlier. Tiny lands a heavy strike on Drexler's shield, forcing the veteran knight backward. As they exchange blows, the energy released from their clash sends ripples through the arena. Drexler's hands shake from the sheer weight behind Tiny's attacks. Tiny charges again, and his weapon crashes against the shield. He increases his speed and unleashes a barrage of 23 rapid strikes. His opponent also notices how much faster he has become. The audience watches in amazement, stunned that Tiny can swing such a heavy mace with that speed. Drexler grabs his own weapon as well, deciding that he no longer needs to hold back. As they clash again, Tiny starts finding his rhythm, sensing the flow of mana and applying the gravity principles he has just learned. He realizes that by controlling his weight, he can make his swings feel either light or heavy whenever needed. To test it, he attacks his opponent again with full power. Drexler's eyes widen as he feels the impact of Tiny's strike. To end the match, Tiny leaps high into the air and activates his battle technique, Form 1 Lightning Smash. The resulting explosion shatters the arena floor. As the dust settles over the broken arena, Drexler understands that continuing the fight is pointless. Tiny thanks him for helping him. Drexler jokes that he held back a great deal during their exchange. Tiny responds by saying he has not even used his spirit summoning abilities yet, then calls forth Walling, laughing at his confidence and undeniable skill. Drexler formally welcomes him into the elite ranks of the Blue Wing Knights. However, Tiny immediately ruins the atmosphere by saying he has no intention of joining the order, leaving Drexler completely stunned. Shaken by his ability, Drexler realizes Tiny has already grasped the hidden secrets of the Valencia family. Later, Asgard casually tells Tiny that he forgot to inform the Blue Wing Knights about the boy's future plans to travel the world. It is better for him not to belong to any specific organization, but he has still surpassed expectations. Tiny modestly says his rapid growth is thanks to the Lord's guidance. Sensing that the first major disaster is approaching, the Lord reveals that preparations are almost complete. As his final piece of equipment, he decides to give Tiny an artifact warhammer. It is a weapon infused with semi-permanent magic, worth several years of a knight's salary. Tiny humbly asks him not to spend so much on him. Interestingly, the Lord admits he had been making it for months, originally planning it as a retirement gift for Drexler. Later, Tiny goes to Randall's Hammers, the workshop of an elderly dwarf blacksmith. Asgard wants him to adjust the weapon to fit the boy. At first, Randall feels insulted, believing that adjusting a master-level weapon for a child is a waste of his skill. Tiny knows from Heinen that master dwarves always want to find worthy wielders for their weapons. To earn his respect, Tiny displays his expert-level mana. The dwarf uses his truthful eye, a racial ability that senses honesty in a person's emotions. He finally realizes Tiny is genuine. He tells him to wait and agrees to show him the weapon. Sometime later, Tiny examines his future weapon. Randall explains that the Duke's artifact is being refined with shock absorption spells, so he must add protective magic. Tiny asks about offensive enchantments, which displeases the dwarf. The boy wants it to be perfect, since a new Warhammer artifact is not something one sees often. Still, he agrees to take it because it already has 3 kinds of magic. Randall then mentions another weapon he has hidden away. It is a massive warhammer made of compressed black steel with weight-amplifying runes. Its previous owner abandoned it because it was too heavy to lift. Tiny's eyes light up when he hears this. The dwarf says it also has shock amplification and self-recovery. Tiny immediately demands to see. A while later, despite the hammer weighing more than 100 kilograms, Tiny lifts it easily and slams it down, breaking the workshop floor. He recognizes that it strongly resembles Nocturne, the weapon from his previous life. He asks Randall to modify the handle so he can keep using it as he grows. The irritated dwarf eventually agrees when Tiny says the Duke's family will pay double. His new weapon is named Stamp. After returning to the castle, Tiny reports everything to the Lord, who is relieved that the Stamp hammer has found an owner, allowing Drexler to keep his original gift. With 2 weeks left until the weapon is ready, Tiny decides to focus on training. When he uses an Eastern term, Asgard is surprised to hear. The Lord is impressed that Tiny is studying Eastern languages, noting that it creates a perfect cover for his mysterious background. However, the mood changes when they bring up Khloe's upcoming engagement to the Crown Prince. Tiny warns him again that the prince is fated to die on the wedding day. That event will trigger the second disaster, in which the imperial family is destroyed. As a result, the entire nation will fall. In his previous life, Khloe became known as the Crown Princess of Misfortune. Asgard admits that he understands all of this, but remains confident he can change that fate. Tiny points out that they still lack accurate information. Asgard remarks that Khloe is remarkable, but he also knows she still has much to learn. Tiny admits the same, since he knows she will be forced to govern a collapsing empire while suffering greatly. Asgard is determined to choose more carefully this time. Tiny does not argue, but states that if the Lord's plan fails, he will save Khloe in his own way. The conversation shifts sharply when Tiny speaks about Khloe too casually. The Lord's protective instincts flare up at once, and he smacks Tiny on the head again, accusing him of developing feelings for his daughter. Outside, the atmosphere is far more festive. Crowds gather at the castle for the coming-of-age ceremony. As the ceremony approaches, Subordinate stands by the window and reports to the Lord that more guests than expected have arrived. Since the event belongs to the Valencia family, many nobles have gathered. Genus Freewell, captain of the Blue Wing Knight Order, makes sure every detail proceeds smoothly so nothing disturbs the occasion. The Lord acknowledges his efforts. He then mentions that a representative from Lowhider has also arrived. Unfortunately, it is the troublesome third son. The dukedom of Lowhider holds major influence in the kingdom and has rivaled the Valencia family for generations. Because their hostility runs deep, sending someone like him feels openly disrespectful. The Lord is surprised and orders that the man be clearly reminded he is standing in Valencia territory. Genus explains that the necessary preparations are already arranged. The Lord says he can always depend on him. However, he suddenly looks at Genus closely and asks whether he is hiding any illness. Genus is confused by the sudden concern. The Lord quickly dismisses the idea and says it is nothing. He adds that Genus does not need to personally oversee the ceremony. Genus refuses to step back, saying Khloe feels like family to him, almost like a younger sister, so he wants to remain involved. The Lord accepts this and assures him there is no need to apologize. Khloe has always followed Genus closely, almost as if he were her elder brother too. The Lord then then changes the subject and mentions marriage. Genus becomes visibly confused. He rejects the topic and reminds the Lord not to ask such a question again. The Lord grows uneasy and apologizes, blaming the pressure of the ceremony. He then allows Genus to return to his duties. After Genus leaves, the Lord quietly reflects. Genus became captain after his father's death and has always been reliable. Then he remembers Tiny once saying that he had never heard of Genus in the future. That detail troubles him. Neither marriage nor illness can explain his disappearance. A 6th-level mana user would not die in an ordinary battle. Because of that, the Lord concludes that the second calamity must be the cause. At the same time, Tiny trains outside and breathes heavily while thinking about Genus. He admits that Asgard has a point. With so many nobles caught in political tension, trouble during the ceremony seems very likely. The presence of so many powerful figures only raises the risk. Soon, Khloe approaches him. He worries that staying outside may be improper, since many delegates have already arrived. Vivian explains that she has even tried to stop Khloe from walking around freely. Khloe admits that the room inside feels stifling, while she is more comfortable here. She also feels pleased because she can see Walling. Tiny summons Walling and offers to let her spend time with him. She brightens and holds Walling in her arms, feeling that being near him makes everything less dull. At that moment, Tebren von Lowhider arrives and boldly greets Khloe. He praises her beauty and proudly introduces himself. Khloe is surprised when she realizes he is from the Lowhider family. He presents himself confidently and acts as though their relationship has already been decided. He suggests that since this is their first meeting, they should spend time together and even brings alcohol, as if it suits the occasion. Khloe is confused by his behavior. Offering alcohol before any engagement is announced feels inappropriate. Vivian immediately steps forward and makes it clear that Khloe must attend to other guests. Tebren responds arrogantly and questions how a female knight dares interrupt him. He orders his muscular subordinate Graham to step forward. Graham moves in front of her and insists that this conversation should remain between noble children only. Vivian firmly replies that his argument makes no sense. Graham then changes his tone and explains that his young master has sincerely waited for years, asking for understanding. Tebren again pushes for a chance. Tiny watches the situation carefully. Graham's smile looks even more suspicious than Tebren's arrogance. Tiny chooses to step in. He calmly asks Khloe who they are, which confuses her and immediately irritates Tebren. Tebren orders Graham to remove the child at once. Before he can properly react, Tiny strikes him with a single slap and sends him flying high into the air. Tebren crashes violently onto the ground. Driven by anger, Graham rushes at Tiny again. Tiny responds just as easily and slaps him once more, sending him over a nearby building. From a window inside that building, a noble watches in complete shock. He cannot believe that one blow from such a young boy can knock down a trained knight so effortlessly. As Graham continues falling, his mind returns to how everything began. He remembers when the Lord ordered him to accompany his third son and create a scandal at Khloe's ceremony. He hesitates and says this action will stain Lowhider's name. The master dismisses the concern immediately. Tebren no longer belongs to Lowhider. He was already going to be disowned and expelled, making him nothing more than discarded waste. Solving a problem so cleanly in exchange for a single piece of trash seems efficient. He is reminded to follow orders, act ignorant, and forget everything afterward. As Graham crashes down, two nobles watch the scene from a window above. They are amazed that an expert knight has been defeated by a child. The sight unsettles them. One of them struggles to identify Tiny as the one responsible, while the other concludes that no ordinary genius could do this. Someone like him must be a monster. One of them finds the thought amusing. Duke Valencia unknowingly raising such a creature seems entertaining, and meeting that boy becomes tempting to him. Their conversation then turns to Duke Alan Con Lowhider. They suspect Duke Lowhider is only pretending to be loyal to the Imperial family while trying to undermine the alliance between the Imperials and the Valencias. They scoff at the idea of Lowhider competing with the Valencia family, especially since Duke Valencia has been a powerful aura user for years. One noble remarks that the Emperor does not want Isgard to become too powerful. They look at the two men the boy knocked out and mention that those two should be dealt with anyway, but the other says there is no point. It is because the young masters of Valencia, who are fiercely protective of their little sister, have just returned home. Back inside, Isgard tells Tiny that Tiburon's misconduct led to his expulsion from Lowhider, so Tiny will not be legally punished for attacking a noble. However, the Lord slams the table and warns Tiny to stop handling every problem with violence, reminding him that he does not want the boy imprisoned before the Demon King army arrives. Tiny points out that the guests were acting suspiciously. This causes a sudden outburst from Isgard Iskar, who loses his temper and shouts about how anyone dares make a move on his daughter inside his own home. Tiny thinks Iskard is completely ignoring his own advice about restraint. As Tiny stands there, he is nearly run over by two aggressive young men, Khloe's brothers, who are searching for Tiburon to give him a permanent lesson. In the confusion, Tiny accidentally knocks one of them to the ground. The brother is stunned. To see a child withstand their momentum, they recognize Tiny from the rumors about his clash with Drexler and realize he is the boy their father is training. The eldest, Aaron, acknowledges Tiny's talent with respect, but ends the meeting quickly so they can continue chasing Tiburon, vowing that he will not leave the territory alive. Tiny recognizes Aaron as the future heir, but suddenly grows concerned when he realizes the second brother did not exist in his original timeline. He worries that this brother may die in the future, just like Janice. On his way back, Tiny vents his irritation about the Azran imperial family, who are obsessed with their golden dragon bloodline and restrict guests based on noble status. His complaints are overheard by two nobles who suddenly appear. One mocks him for saying such insulting things out loud. Tiny immediately senses that the man is using a magical disguise to conceal his real face. He introduces himself as Baron Narsar, a guest at the ceremony. Narsar mocks the Duke's judgment for accepting a child like Tiny. Tiny's tone sharpens as he reminds him that he is showing disrespect on Valencia territory. Narsar instantly laughs it off and pretends to be friendly, even offering to treat Tiny to dinner in order to build a friendship with him. Tiny considers beating the truth out of the stranger right there to uncover his identity, but he remembers what Asgard told him and decides to wait for a better opportunity. However, when Narsar asks whether Tiny can arrange a meeting with Khloe, Tiny's patience runs out. Without any warning, Tiny lands a powerful slap that sends him flying into the sky. Narsar's companion is stunned, while Tiny simply smiles at him. Tiny realizes he is in a difficult position after losing his temper again. His thoughts are interrupted when Exilin suddenly attacks. Tiny barely avoids the strike and manages to meet his sword, but his opponent is driven by rage and vows to tear him apart. The situation becomes dangerous when Tiny senses monospace control around him. He realizes in shock that he is facing a challenger-ranked knight. Exilin threatens to cut him down, but Tiny protects himself with his iron god armor, and seizing the moment, Tiny summons Walling behind his enemy. The sight of a spirit beast catches Exilin by surprise, giving Tiny a chance to land a punch. However, the blow has no effect at all. Exilin does not even flinch. Instead, he grabs Tiny by the shirt and throws him away like a ragdoll. Tiny manages to regain his balance just as the knight prepares a devastating strike against him. His spirit wolf steps between them. The next moment, Tiny is slammed into the ground. Just as Exilin moves in to finish him, Narker arrives and orders him to stop, taking full responsibility for the misunderstanding. Later, Genus meets Tiny to settle the situation. Tiny apologizes and explains that he acted out of suspicion. Since the noble involved has chosen to forgive him, Genus decides to let it pass. Still, he gives Tiny a stern warning. He explains that Tiny should not underestimate Valencia or the people allowed to visit it with special permission. Tiny feels the man's intimidating aura and listens as Genus urges him to be more careful so he can reach his full potential. Before Genus leaves, Tiny tries to get more information and asks about Narker. Genus chooses to keep that matter private. Tiny asks again, trying to confirm whether Narker belongs to the Imperial family. Genus regrets saying anything at all. He understands that challenger rank fighters are extremely rare. He then tells Tiny to keep it secret, and Tiny agrees. Tiny pieces everything together on his own. He concludes that the mysterious powerhouse must be an Imperial family inspector, sent because Khloe's upcoming ceremony is basically the official announcement of her engagement to the Crown Prince. A week passes, and the day of the ceremony finally arrives. The castle is filled with guests. While Genus focuses on making the day perfect for their sister, Tiny focuses on the buffet. Genus watches in irritation as Tiny keeps stuffing himself with food, telling him to slow down before he hurts himself. Tiny brushes off the concern. Genus decides to let it go, understanding that Tiny needs the calories to support his growing body. Their conversation is interrupted by Narsar, who approaches Tiny and asks to speak with him while Genus is busy with official duties. Tiny quickly apologizes for his earlier rudeness. Narsar surprises him by acting extremely gracious. He says he was actually impressed by Tiny's decisive nature and even tells him to hit him again if he ever behaves arrogantly in the future. Tiny feels completely unsettled, wondering whether the man has some twisted personality. The celebration truly begins when the host announces the main figure of the day. Khloe enters the hall beside her father and two brothers, looking truly stunning in her ceremonial outfit. Narsar Narsar is visibly captivated by her beauty. Seeing him stare at Khloe so intensely, Tiny feels a sudden urge to protect her. The nobles also gaze at her and notice how beautiful she looks. She remains calm, knowing that from this moment onward, her life is officially changing forever. Tiny watches her and remembers the gentle way she asked him to become her brother. This memory makes his mana leak out, which summons Walling into the hall and leaves everyone completely speechless. Scarred looks shocked as well. Walling behaves like a large puppy around Khloe before she sits down and tells him to stay still. Some guests murmur complaints about a dog being present at an elegant party, but Walling suddenly begins to glow. He grows into a massive giant wolf on the spot, making everyone freeze in fear. They realize he is not an ordinary animal, but a powerful spirit. Narsar thanks him for the spectacle. Tiny only finds his gratitude irritating and thinks there is something suspicious about him. He silently decides that if Narsar keeps acting this way, he may have to slap him again. Scarred approaches his daughter and becomes slightly emotional, saying that her mother would have been proud. This makes the atmosphere heavy and sad, though only those who know the family's history truly understand why. Then the Lord places the medal around her neck and announces the main moment. He points his finger, light flashes throughout the hall, and a magical projection of her fiancé appears. The man introduces himself as Bradley Van Oslan. He explains that he cannot attend in person, but feels grateful to be her fiancé. Among the crowd, Vivian recognizes his voice and thinks he may be the reincarnation of a legendary king. Tiny is not impressed because he remembers that in his previous life, the man died for no meaningful reason. When Narsar tries to step forward, Tiny holds him back and tells him to calm down. He had told him to spell Narsar backward, and Tiny realizes it becomes Asrin. As he moves ahead, Tiny starts to panic. He realizes the man he once beat up is actually the crown prince. A wave of dread hits him as he thinks about the trouble he may be in. Genus notices him trembling and asks what is wrong, so Tiny blames the heat. Genus tells him not to worry because the prince has already forgiven him. He makes it clear that Tiny will be safe in Valencia. He informs him that the crown prince was the one who pushed for this marriage despite the emperor's orders. This confirms that the prince is now officially on their side. Later, Genus says Asgard wants to meet Tiny after the ceremony. When they meet, the Lord thanks Tiny for Walling since he helped Khloe remain calm. Then they begin discussing more serious issues. Asgard thinks over what Tiny told him. A powerful artifact will disappear, and a massive monster called a Kraken will destroy the capital. He wonders why a Kraken would appear instead of some other monster. Tiny suggests investigating it. Then he asks about the hammer stamp. The Lord tells him the tuning is finished and orders Tiny to visit the blacksmith the next day to collect his weapon. Tiny then arrives at the blacksmith's shop, where the new weapon proves to be a complete game changer. The blacksmith explains that it is heavier to increase power, repairs itself automatically, and has been perfectly adjusted to Tiny's mana. The blacksmith admits the weapon feels eerie and unnatural. He wonders how his son managed to create something so intense. Tiny lifts it as if it weighs nothing, and the blacksmith advises him to test it with a swing. The weapon feels smooth, almost as if it is cooperating with him. Tiny is very pleased with. Later, Tiny rides his familiar outside the city to test how the weapon performs while moving. He is deeply impressed and feels grateful to Randall for completing it. Walling becomes energetic and speeds up, which Tiny assumes is because the wolf enjoys running beneath the moonlight. He checks their pace and realizes they are moving so quickly that they will reach the port city of Annexon in only a week. Meanwhile, in a dark room elsewhere, the demon followers receive word that Tiny has left the Duke's lands. He is irritated that Tiny is riding a top-tier spirit beast far faster than any normal carriage. Once he confirms Tiny is heading toward Annexon on his way to Karun, the leader decides this is the ideal moment to eliminate him. He orders his men to contact the Tamers and kill him. Back on the road, a group of Black Knights appears and blocks Tiny's path. They act arrogantly and mock him. They remind him that they are on the same level. They claim he cannot defeat them even if he relies on his spirit beast. They begin gathering mana, preparing to overpower him by force. One of them shoots an arrow, but Tiny simply swats it from the air like an insect. This terrifies them since it was supposed to be a high-level attack. They try to convince themselves it was only a trick and charge again, believing their numbers will give them victory. Tiny has no interest in their talk. He swings his hammer and crushes one knight instantly. The man realizes too late that Tiny's strength is genuine. Before he crashes to the ground, Tiny condemns them as vermin who serve demons instead of acting like true knights. When the remaining knights realize they were deceived about Tiny's real power, they panic and try to flee. However, Tiny has no intention of letting them escape. He chases them down and drives his hammer into the ground, splitting the earth open and trapping them inside the cracks. With them dealt with, he is starting to love his new weapon. But he pauses, wondering how they knew exactly which road he would take. He feels slight regret for killing them all, since now he cannot question them. Suddenly, a massive tree comes crashing down behind him. A huge two-headed troll emerges from the darkness. Tiny realizes the situation has become much worse, as a high-level monster has appeared, and is now targeting him. Tiny looks at the massive two-headed troll and understands how absurd this is, since a rank 5 monster should not be in this area. Creatures like this are powerful enough to fight elite mages, yet this one charges at him with an axe. He barely avoids the swing before a voice from the shadows orders the beast to kill him. This confirms that the monster belongs to a magic tamer and was sent specifically to eliminate him. He realizes the troll is being controlled. He sends Walling to deal with the tamer, but the mage uses a magical weapon to drive the troll into a frenzy. The monster throws its axe again, and although Tiny dodges, the force is strong enough to snap trees like twigs. The troll is incredibly quick and keeps attacking from behind, which begins to irritate Tiny. He knows trolls are classified as rank 5 because they are all muscle and regenerate almost instantly, so he chooses to stay patient and wait for an opening in its defense. The fight becomes even more dangerous when the troll releases a cloud of poisonous smoke. Tiny feels his body growing weaker, but he uses his mana to keep himself standing just as the axe comes crashing down toward his head. He swings his new hammer upward with all his strength, creating a massive impact. The weapon's added weight works perfectly, and for a moment it seems like he has gained the advantage. However, the monster's wounds heal right before his eyes. Tiny is forced to pull back and keep jumping around to avoid being crushed. He continues, landing heavy blows, but the troll keeps regenerating. The tamer watches from a distance, thinking Tiny will eventually exhaust himself. The battle goes on, but Tiny eventually runs out of space to retreat. Then he notices that the troll is finally getting tired. The tamer's plan backfires because the troll begins slowing down first. Its constant regeneration is draining its energy faster than it can recover. The tamer panics as Walling lunges out and pins him to the ground. With the tamer restrained, Tiny charges at the troll one final time and channels lightning into his hammer. The explosion that follows is enormous, and when the dust clears, Tiny stands there holding both of the monster's heads. He walks over to the captured tamer to get answers. The man says their group is based in a lawless city controlled by a mayor who leads a city alliance. Tiny does not believe the full story, since the organization would not casually sacrifice a high-level tamer like this. He presses him harder until the man admits they are the ones planning to steal Karun's artifact. Tiny makes it clear that the man's life depends on revealing the name of the person in charge. The tamer tries to explain that he will die if he gives up the name. Tiny says that is only a theory, then threatens him to take the risk. After finishing matters there, Tiny travels to the port city of Annexon. Tiny remembers that Asgard said a contact would be waiting for him at a local pub. He finds the building and enters, but freezes the moment he sees who is sitting there. The person sent to assist him is Asgard himself. Asgard gives a brief apology, and his body suddenly changes into the form of a completely ordinary-looking man. He casually says the shop does not serve drinks to children, leaving Tiny completely frozen. The man's face is impossible to recognize, but what frightens Tiny even more is that he cannot sense even a trace of mana from him. There is no spell to break and no illusion to see through. The disguise is flawless. Nearby, a couple of men start laughing and tell Tiny that the bar is not a playground. One begins making an insulting remark about Tiny's black hair, but Walling instantly moves between them. Seeing the wolf, the men stumble back in complete panic. Tiny mentally notes that Walling probably should not have done that, but decides that some people simply need to learn their place. The disguised man watches Walling and realizes that Tiny is a spirit summoner. He puts the clues together, understands that Tiny is the special order customer he was expecting, and apologizes for the delayed greeting. He leads Tiny into a back room. Tiny gives him a silver tablet, which the man confirms as the official seal of the Duke of Valencia. The man explains that he leads Blackwing, the Duke's secret intelligence group. They are not merely elite fighters, but the finest spies in the world. He introduces himself as Jay, commander of the entire operation. Tiny is confused because someone in Jay's position should be an extremely powerful warrior, yet he still cannot sense any mana from him. Jay reveals something shocking. His mana has never awakened. Tiny is stunned, but Jay laughs it off and briefly shifts back into Asgard's form. He explains that having no mana makes disguises somewhat troublesome, but also enjoyable because nobody can track him. Tiny admits that the tactic is incredibly bold and dangerous. Jay agrees that the thrill is the best part. Moving on to business, Jay tells Tiny that a 7th Circle mage named Gale Anderson, known as the Warlock of Tsunami, Tommy, has disappeared. Tiny understands exactly how serious this is, since Gale is an immensely powerful mage capable of controlling the sea. Jay explains that Gale vanished 2 weeks ago while traveling at sea, and all communication with him was cut off. This creates a major problem because Gale was supposed to provide a recommendation letter for Tiny's mission. Jay hands Tiny a new identity tablet, explaining that they have a backup plan. Tiny is pleased that Asgard kept his promise. Tiny then mentions the name he forced out of the tamer earlier, Hustle, a devil worshipper connected to the current disaster. Jay records the name, suspecting it may belong to an orc or a werbeast. He promises to investigate it. Suddenly, frantic knocking interrupts them. An agent tells Jay he must leave because they have arrived. Tiny assumes it is some serious threat, but the major presence turns out to be a huge crowd of hungry customers. Jay spends the afternoon serving food in a packed restaurant. Tiny watches the chaos, wondering how a fake pub built for spying somehow became a successful business. 2 days later, Tiny arrives at the Flaxen docks. He is disguised with his face covered as he prepares to board a ship bound for Karun. When the attendant asks for identification, Tiny lets a small amount of mana flow into the seal. The attendant nearly jumps in shock, stunned to see a noble traveling alone. Tiny gives a cover story about coming from a fallen noble house, which makes the attendant feel guilty enough to apologize for his rudeness and wish Tiny a safe journey. As he steps onto the deck, Tiny thinks about the background Jay prepared for his false identity. He is posing as a descendant of the Morse family, nobles who were falsely accused of worshipping demons and vanished 40 years ago. Since the family was known for black hair and black eyes, the disguise suits him perfectly. Officially, he is a fugitive from a tragic bloodline, though he thinks the part about being the son of a chivalrous elf is a little excessive. Just as he settles in, his instincts sharpen. He senses dark mana moving nearby and realizes the source is somewhere inside the ship. Tiny feels the mana shift around him and immediately understands that sinister energy surrounds the area. It is not limited to 1 or 2 people. The dark presence is spreading through the entire crowd aboard the ship. He realizes their plan is far worse than a simple attack. It feels as though they intend to turn everyone on board into human sacrifices. The violence begins when a man lunges at Tiny, aiming a knife straight at his head. Tiny does not even react. He catches the man's wrist with his bare hand and snaps the bone like a dry branch. As the man screams and blood spills out, the crowd freezes in fear, realizing the person Tiny just crippled is bleeding badly. When someone shouts for Tiny to let him go, he does the opposite. He kicks the fallen knife into the air, catches it, and with one smooth motion drives it into another man's chest. The man dies instantly, coughing blood, but the strangest part is the thick, foul smoke that begins rising from his body. It smells rotten, and the passengers start panicking, shouting that the dead man was a demon worshipper. One man thanks Tiny for revealing the threat while trying to approach him under the excuse of proper procedure. Tiny does not believe the act for even a moment. He grabs the man, twists his arm, and smashes him into another accomplice. As both collapse while coughing blood, Tiny calmly continues counting the bodies. The remaining members realize they have been exposed and start fleeing, shouting that Tiny is a murderer, but the truth is clear. Every one of them is a demon follower. The ship's captain hurries over, acting outraged and shocked. He tries to apologize and shift all blame onto his corrupted subordinates, asking Tiny to help clean up the situation. Tiny simply mocks his poor acting and kills him immediately. When the captain's head falls onto the deck, the smoke rising from his neck is even thicker than the others, proving he was the most corrupted of them all. Later, the scene moves to the castle, where King Imid van Karen receives a report. It turns out the crew operating this shipping route for 5 years had been completely corrupted. Several sailors were infected with a junior-level evil disease, giving them enough strength to manage the ship, but the captain had reached blader-level corruption. The king is informed that for these followers to reach such a level of evil, they must have sacrificed hundreds, if not thousands, of innocent people. These sacrifices grant demon worshippers enormous power and can even help high-level evil clans break through the boundaries between dimensions. Tiny tells him that demon followers are like a disease spreading through humanity. The king admits he has not encountered such a severe case in 30 years and realizes he has grown far too complacent. He credits Tiny, under his false identity as an elf-blooded spirit summoner, for preventing what could have become a massacre. The king grows curious about Tiny's spirit beast and asks to see it. His advisors panic, warning that revealing such a rare spirit is dangerous, but Tiny ignores their concern. He summons Walling on the spot. The king is visibly shaken by how powerful and real the spirit appears, then immediately requests a private conversation. Although his guards worry about leaving him alone with a stranger, the king orders them out of the room. Once they are alone, the king goes straight to the point. He tells Tiny that he knows the whole quarter elf story is a complete lie. Imud looks directly at him and demands to know the real reason Tiny came to the kingdom. The king immediately exposes the lie about Tiny's heritage, explaining that black hair and elven blood are biologically impossible together. This leaves Tiny stunned. The king quickly clarifies that this knowledge is a closely guarded royal secret, so Tiny immediately apologizes and admits that his true goal involves hunting demon followers to stop them from stealing a divine artifact and causing a disaster in Karun. The king's sharp intuition continues to pressure Tiny as he identifies him as a native of the empire. He explains that this creates a diplomatic obstacle, since Karun maintains a position that favors the kingdom's alliance over the empire. Despite his natural distrust toward an imperial citizen hiding his identity, the king chooses to place some trust in him. He bases that decision on Tiny's status as a spirit summoner. He relies on the common belief that anyone with a soul pure enough to command spirits must be good by nature. Tiny feels a slight guilt over that assumption, knowing from his previous life that spirit summoners are not always righteous. Tiny uses the opportunity to request an official meeting with the guardians of the artifact. He promises to do everything he can for Karun. The king grants the request and decides to trust the boy. Later, the king skips the usual ceremonies and formally appoints Tiny as a knight, assigning him the duty of guarding the sacred artifact. As the badge is pinned to his chest, Tiny thinks about this being his first knighthood in this life, vowing to use this new beginning to protect humanity. The conversation grows darker when Tiny tells the king about someone named Hustle, the mastermind, and notes that the name has Orcish origins. The king's expression turns deeply serious after hearing it. He asks whether the information is reliable. Tiny explains that it came from a fifth circle mage. The king asks for time to think and tells him to leave. Elsewhere, the tsunami sorcerer creates a magical shield with his weapon around the crack, using every bit of his strength. He is breathing heavily when a man steps forward and praises his effort. He shouts and recognizes the man as Hustle. Hustle remarks that the boy could threaten their plans. Meanwhile, Tiny joins the Divine Artifact Protection Troop, where his presence immediately causes resentment. The veteran soldiers doubt the combat achievements of a child. One member, Mason, loudly insults Tiny for receiving high authority and rank without properly earning them. Tiny grows annoyed and sighs. He understands that the king allowed this appointment because the artifact is now only a symbol, while the protection unit has basically become a place for failures. Knowing he is facing an internal power struggle, Tiny decides to establish his authority at once. Tiny approaches Mason and casually begins speaking to him. When Mason tries to intimidate him through seniority, Tiny summons his familiar. The sudden display of overwhelming power frightens the knights. Tiny then tells them they have the advantage. He adds that he was already searching for a demon follower to use as an example and asks whether they are interested. All of them instantly panic. They deny it and salute him, so Tiny advises them to do their best from now on. He still senses that something is off and remembers the king's expression. He suspects the king already knows about Hustle. His thoughts are interrupted by a man's voice. The man laughs and praises the boy for knocking out the demon followers. He says he is pleased to meet the boy and introduces himself as Truman, captain of the Divine Artifact Protection Unit. Tiny also greets the captain politely. During their meeting, the boy secretly thinks that the captain's strength does not match his high rank. Since the captain knows Tiny volunteered for the assignment, he gets straight to the point and mentions his interest in the sacred artifact. This sudden subject makes Tiny suspicious because it is too closely tied to the current disaster. He stays calm and acts curious, but makes sure not to reveal too much. The captain already expected Tiny to be interested, so he takes him somewhere else to explain how things truly work. He drops several books onto the table and explains that people misunderstand these holy tools. He uses the holy barrier as an example, saying it only works against low-rank evil and completely fails against true demonic energy. Because of these limitations, most people assume the artifacts are merely symbolic. To correct Tiny's view, the captain recommends a specific book about an ancient pact. The promise of the mythical age proves these tools were meant to be humanity's ultimate shields. Hearing this, Tiny realizes he completely misjudged the man. Since he senses no evil from the captain, he lowers his guard. Eventually, the captain decides reading about it is too dull and tells Tiny that seeing the real thing is far better. Because of that, he leads him into the most secure part of the castle. On the way, the captain asks his name and explains why everyone treats guarding these artifacts as a low-level duty. Tiny assumes it is because the artifact is only a symbol, but the captain opens the door and shows him the real thing. Inside, a massive glowing artifact called Humanitas is revealed. It is enormous and beautiful, floating silently in midair. The captain explains that the guardian role is considered unimportant because the artifact does not need protection. He adds that no one understands why it floats, and people believe only someone truly worthy can touch it. Because everyone assumes the artifact can defend itself, they never assign a high-ranking guard to it. Tiny decides to test it and reaches out his hand. The moment he comes close, his entire body is wrapped in light. The captain is completely stunned, having never seen such power before. Tiny also feels something strange. Because of his sensitivity to mana, he realizes the artifact's barrier is vibrating and reacting directly to his own energy. The captain grabs his shoulder in shock, realizing Tiny is practically communicating with the artifact. Later, they return outside, and the captain admits that Tiny is full of surprises. He says he has served there for years and has never witnessed anything like it. This makes Tiny respect him more. Even though the captain is not the strongest fighter, he clearly takes his duty seriously. Suddenly, an arrogant man named Greg Simbo from the Royal Knights appears and starts behaving as if the place belongs to him. He treats the captain with contempt and directs most of his insults at Tiny, calling him a holy half-elf. Tiny calmly corrects him and says he is a quarter elf, even though that identity is false. Greg begins mocking the idea of elves being heroes and tries to provoke a fight to prove Tiny is fake. Tiny does not even react, since he can see the attack coming clearly. He steps aside, grabs Greg's arm, and slams him into the floor. Greg keeps trying to talk back, so Tiny simply lifts him and smashes him into the ground again to silence him. As Greg lies there admitting his mistake, the captain watches from behind in complete shock. Meanwhile, a mysterious man observes everything from above, thinking that things have finally become interesting now that Tiny has appeared. After that, Robert Dumble from the Royal Knight Order steps forward to challenge Tiny, only to be knocked out instantly by a sharp slap. This defeat causes the other knights to rush in, but Tiny efficiently knocks them down one after another without any effort. The situation escalates when Vice Captain Randolph Grandchest enters. The fight and clashes weapons with Tiny. After being forced back, Randolph earns slight praise from Tiny for being somewhat useful, which leads Tiny to ask whether he knows a man named Hustle. The Vice Captain admits he has no idea who that is, leaving Tiny to wonder why nobody recognizes the name. The atmosphere changes when a man with overwhelming mana steps into view, commenting that Tiny showed no mercy to the fallen knights. Tiny recognizes the newcomer as a high-level expert, probably at Challenger grade. The man introduces himself as Liam von Peterson, captain of the Royal Knight Order. Tiny tries to remain respectful, but Liam ignores the formality, explaining that he is only an old veteran looking for some excitement. To make the offer more tempting, Liam promises to share information about Hustle if Tiny agrees to spar with him. Realizing this is a rare opportunity to face a top-tier opponent and obtain the answers he needs, Tiny accepts the challenge without hesitation. Tiny attacks with full power, cracking the ground beneath him. He warns Liam not to underestimate him. Their weapons clash with tremendous force, but when Tiny tries to follow with a kick and Liam does not move, Tiny quickly retreats. He realizes Liam has a stone-like defensive attribute. Tiny notes that Liam's style is perfectly suited for heavy combat, carrying the weight and stability of a true Challenger-grade knight. Despite the gap in strength, Liam is impressed by Tiny's refined technique and decides to take the fight seriously, rushing forward to continue the duel. The two trade a flurry of rapid blows. Liam notices that the boy only lacks maturity and experience. Tiny wants to understand how Liam maintains his center of gravity while enduring such heavy pressure. Tiny manages to land a 4-hit combination, forcing Liam to admit that calling Tiny a genius is not enough, and that monster is a better word. Tiny accepts the praise and continues pressing the attack until Liam decides to end the match. Liam releases a final strike that throws Tiny's balance off and forces him back, stopping the spar before it gets too intense. Satisfied with the experience, Liam promises to keep his side of the deal and provide the information. Later, Tiny thinks over everything he has learned, considering the mystery behind Hustle's true identity. After the fight, Liam explains how much he enjoyed such an unexpected experience at his age. Tiny also values the spar and quietly admires Liam's skill. Keeping his promise, Liam shares information about a man named Ritman. He describes Ritman as an imperial knight who answers only to the king and travels so widely that he may know who Hustle is. Liam even offers to arrange a meeting, but a messenger suddenly rushes in, calling Tiny's name because the king wants to see him immediately. When Tiny arrives, the king tells him that he has already found the person Tiny wanted. Standing there is Ritman, the East Coast Passage expert. Tiny is stunned, wondering when he ever asked the king to find this man, especially since he is the exact person Liam just mentioned. Ritman greets Tiny as the hero who defeated the demon followers and asks whether Tiny was looking for him. Tiny tries to remain polite, fight. The king notices this while Tiny grows frustrated that he was not warned beforehand, leaving him unable to play along properly. To cover himself, Tiny nervously explains that because of his appearance, he thought he might be connected to the eastern continent and once mentioned wanting to visit it. Rittman accepts the explanation, saying the king never hesitates to reward people and has always been generous whenever Rittman discovers a new travel route. The king then reminds Tiny that he cannot leave for the east until he keeps his promise to eliminate the demon followers. Tiny is confused about why the king suddenly brings this up, especially in front of Rittman. He checks Rittman's mana and finds it completely normal, meaning Wooling would not stay calm if he were a demon follower. However, he notices that Rittman's mana form is an unusual blend of beast and human, which reminds him of Jay's comment about orcs or beastmen. The king tells Rittman that he will be extremely useful in destroying the cultists, which shocks Rittman because he was supposed to depart the next day to search for someone named Gale. The king remains firm and cancels that trip, telling him that handling the immediate threat comes first. Rittman reluctantly accepts the command. Tiny realizes that even though there is no evil energy, this man is definitely Hustle. Later, the king asks Tiny for his opinion, and Tiny admits that the man does not appear to be a demon follower. The king insists that Tiny remain beside him to confirm it completely. Tiny asks why he is going so far, and the king reveals a mana oath on his chest, glowing with lightning. A mana oath is a vow bound by one's own mana, and breaking it sends a painful shock through the user's mana circles. Tiny thinks a level 3 shock could be dangerous for an old man, and asks why he would take such a risk for someone he barely knows. The king explains that his bloodline can see the future through dreams. He has repeatedly dreamed of the divine artifact vanishing and monsters destroying the capital. When Tiny arrived and said the artifact would disappear, the king understood that the dreams were a warning. He says he would rather be a cowardly old man with a resentful subordinate than allow his kingdom to collapse. Just then, Tiny hears a sound and realizes Hustle has just left the castle. Tiny climbs onto his moon wolf and rushes after him, noting that the wolf still senses no demonic energy. He considers that the real Hustle might be someone else, but the man's sudden escape from the castle makes the answer clear. Tiny decides to chase him down and secure the evidence he needs. Meanwhile, a group of men secretly loads a ship on the river at night. Hustle appears behind them, surprising the crew who expected him to return the next day. He explains that things went wrong because the king ordered someone to stay beside him. Although the men are confused by the king's timing, Hustle tells them not to argue and to prepare for immediate departure. Suddenly, a fiery explosion tears through the ship. Tiny stands amid the wreckage and confronts them, calling them demon followers and asking what they are doing out so late. The group panics when they realize they are being attacked. Tiny charges with a manifold strike and eliminates 4 of them in an instant. He lands confidently and offers the survivors a chance to surrender. While the followers call him a monster, Hustle remains calm and tells his men that Tiny is only an expert-level fighter who is probably exhausted after such a flashy entrance. He claims Tiny is merely trying to buy time to recover mana, which makes Tiny realize his bluff has been exposed. Hustle decides to finish the fight immediately and rushes at Tiny. They clash and Tiny manages to block Hustle's sword with his bare hand, creating an opening for Walling to attack from behind. The wolf tears into Hustle's back, leaving him wounded and roaring in fury. Hustle threatens to rip Tiny apart and tries to force a reverse summoning on the wolf to send a massive shock through Tiny's body. He slashes at the wolf, but Tiny manages to shield only the exact spot being targeted, conserving his mana. Hustle finds that level of control absurd and realizes he has to kill Tiny immediately. Tiny cuts down the remaining followers with a single strike and tells his wolf to focus on movement since his mana is running low. As they continue fighting, Tiny recalls what the king told him about Hustle's past. Most beastmen inherit traits from land animals, but Hustle is a rare mutant born with the traits of a sea creature. Because such mutants remind beastmen of a tribe that once opposed their god, those children are usually killed at birth. The king explained that he saved the survivor and used a mana oath to conceal his identity because he needed Hustle's special abilities. Back in the present, Hustle asks whether the king told him anything else, as water starts swirling around his weapons. Tiny finally remembers the king's final warning: never fight him near the sea, because he is actually a killer whale. Tiny notices that the water is feeding the power of Hustle's soul weapon, making the situation far more dangerous. Hustle stands directly on the water's surface with a sword in each hand, waiting for Tiny to move first. Tiny charges forward while taunting him. He puts all his strength into a massive hammer blow. Hustle blocks the strike with his swords, but the force is so overwhelming that it drives him into a crouch. Internally, Hustle notes that Tiny's physical recovery speed is completely abnormal. Tiny refuses to let up and keeps pressing the attack, his frustration and anger clear in his eyes. Hustle begins to worry, knowing that if the battle drags on, reinforcements will eventually arrive. Tiny lands a punch so heavy that it sends Hustle flying backward. Instead of recovering, Hustle uses the momentum to dive deep into the sea. Tiny assumes his enemy is trying to escape, but a massive wave suddenly rises above him. Hustle says Tiny is no ordinary child, before a giant wave erupts from the water. The creature tells Tiny they will settle things another time, before heading toward the open sea. Because of the orc's incredible speed, Tiny realizes chasing him across the water is impossible. Annoyance rises in him until he notices his wolf leaping through the air as if the wind itself has become solid ground. Tiny realizes Walling has just revealed a new special ability, though he decides they should save that strategy for their next encounter. He stares at the horizon, knowing the orc has promised a rematch, and wonders what other schemes his enemies are preparing. Deep inside a cave, Rittman arrives and shows satisfaction with the situation. He tells Gale that he has met all his expectations. Gale is furious and mocks him. Rittman ignores the rudeness and offers him food, explaining that he must stay conscious to finish the job. He points toward the Kraken, asking how they should deal with it. Gale looks terrified by the creature's presence. The Kraken opens its eye and cracks spread across the shield. Rittman explains that releasing the monster would let the baby contact its mother telepathically, but killing it would alert her as well. Either option would bring Karun's destruction. Wanting Gale to feel the pressure, he reminds him that saving his hometown depends on his cooperation. Gale insists that God will eventually punish him. Rittman laughs it off and drops the food, explaining that he has felt cursed since the day he was born and now lives only for revenge. Meanwhile, Tiny and Liam stand before the king to give their report. They inform the king that the people behind the recent cargo transport were actually demon followers. The cargo itself turns out to be a huge collection of ritual items worth half of the kingdom's entire yearly budget. The king regrets not suspecting Rittman earlier, describing him as someone desperate to prove his value to a world that rejected him. Tiny interrupts the king's thoughts to share something he learned from Liam. He explains that Rittman's work was kept so secret that almost no one had heard of him. The king explains that Rittman likely wanted this anonymity to avoid being hunted by werewolves. Tiny points out that they should have been suspicious from the beginning, because truly ambitious people never hide their presence. The king agrees and decides there is no point dwelling on his past mistakes. Then he asks Tiny whether there is another way to locate the remaining demon followers. Tiny confirms he has a plan and explains that it will work as long as the king gives him the necessary support. The boy then arrives at the hotel, wearing a hooded disguise and carrying luggage behind him. Jay greets him with a formal apology, at first failing to recognize him because official working hours have not started yet. Once Tiny reveals who he is, Jay is utterly shocked by his appearance, and by the huge amount of equipment he brought with him. Tiny explains everything to Jay, including the complicated situation with the demon followers. Since Tiny cannot sense any demonic energy from Hustle, he realizes that Hustle has not become a monster and has simply chosen to cooperate with the enemy. Jay feels a deep shame because he wanted to impress Tiny with Blackwing's strength, but Tiny reassures him by saying they still have the perfect chance to prove their value. Tiny places a box on the table and takes out a royal scroll, telling Jay that the king granted him special authority to take control of the remaining cargo. He explains that since Blackwing has elite trackers, they should handle the forensic investigation of the shipment and identify the culprits. Tiny begins emptying the crates, but Jay hesitates because the task is extremely difficult. When Tiny pulls a live frog from one box to make his point, Jay explains that their previous attempts failed because the enemies are too careful when hiding their traces. Tiny panics, worried that all his effort may have been wasted. However, Jay lifts his mood by pointing out that they now have almost every ritual item the demon followers require. Since these ingredients are rare and most were lost in the current fire, the cult cannot simply purchase replacements anywhere or recreate them quickly. Jay suggests a clever trap. They will open a shop in Karun that sells exactly what the cult lacks. Since the followers are desperate to save time, they will have no choice but to appear at that exact store. Tiny is impressed, realizing Jay is not merely a businessman, but a brilliant strategist. Before they begin working, an assistant brings out a local chicken specialty. Tiny refuses at first, saying he has no time to eat, but Jay persuades him to try just one bite. The taste is so incredible that Tiny's plate is empty before he even understands what happened. He is confused by how delicious the food is. Jay asks for his opinion on the dish. Tiny simply advises him to make money by cooking. Jay accepts the compliment with pride and says they can now infiltrate smoothly. He confidently announces the start of the mission to find the demon followers. 2 months later, at night, 2 hooded strangers approach the store. They are unsure whether this is the correct place. One reassures the other that the owner is just an ordinary businessman looking for profit. The other man is afraid because they are ignoring their elder's advice. But his companion assures him that they already investigated the place. They knock and enter, hoping to complete the transaction quickly. Jay welcomes them and checks their shopping list. As he reviews the items, he realizes they are exactly the ritual materials he was told to watch for. He understands that the targets have finally stepped into the trap and that it is time to inform Tiny. Jay stays calm and tells the customers to wait while he collects the goods from the back. As he pretends to work, he overhears them whispering about their elder's order to remain especially careful. Suddenly, another hooded man enters the shop. While the two are still arguing, a shadow appears. They panic when someone walks in. However, the newcomer smirks and asks to join the conversation. The first two grow even more tense when they recognize him as their elder. Jay assumes he is their partner and wonders whether they will include him in the deal. The newcomer shows his impatience, explaining that he came to hurry them along because their mission is too important to risk failure. The two subordinates try to reassure their elder, claiming they protected their master's identity and checked everything twice. In response, the elder releases a wave of dark, choking smoke that instantly engulfs one of them. He begins a disturbing transformation right in front of Jay. He falls to his knees and begs for forgiveness. The elder calmly tells Jay to have an assistant clean up the mess afterward. He approaches Jay with clear suspicion, noting that the shop appeared far too conveniently for his taste. To test him, he releases another burst of dark mist that knocks Jay unconscious. Sometime later, Tiny finds Jay and shakes him awake, noticing that his clothes are partly torn. As Jay struggles to recall what happened, he calls himself lucky. He remembers the elder realizing he has no mana at all, which is probably why Jay was spared. The visitor simply pulled the dark energy back into his hand and warned Jay that he would die if he spoke about the meeting. Jay points to a pile of ash on the floor, saying the elder is confident he can kill him whenever he wants. Tiny is not willing to ignore this just because Jay has no mana. He argues that leaving such an obvious trace shows the enemy's arrogance, and suggests calling in a professional mage to track them. Jay hesitates, explaining that the danger may be far greater than they expected. He compares the elder's power to the overwhelming aura of a high-ranking captain from the 7th Corps, something that feels almost beyond human. Tiny does not back down despite the danger, insisting they must uncover the truth no matter the risk. He explains that if a plan fails, they simply need to force it to succeed. Jay is impressed by that reasoning and promises to give Tiny his full support in the mission. Over the next month, the knights concentrate heavily on training drills. Tiny, meanwhile, spends most of his time studying. Through his research, he traces the enemy's movements and discovers that a large ritual is being prepared on the nearby islands. To deal with the threat, he arranges an ambush with Blackwing and gives the royal family just enough information to secure official support. While Tiny is reading, he overhears several knights whispering about Liam's absence and assuming he has simply gone on break. Tiny mentions that the king is sending reinforcements, surprising the others. At that moment, a captain enters the room. He complains that too many knights have recently been sent on vacation. He adds that even Liam is gone, leaving him without anyone to visit the bar with. When Tiny asks whether they are close, the captain explains that they are old friends who usually spend time together. He invites Tiny to dinner, but Tiny politely refuses. The captain jokingly asks whether Tiny is also planning to take a vacation, and Tiny goes along with it, saying it seems that way. The captain simply tells him to rest well and return refreshed. When the day of the mission finally arrives, a group of traitorous knights sneaks toward the divine artifact. They feel confident because an important member of the guard is absent, making it the ideal moment to steal the relic. They burst into the room, stand before the artifact, and believe they have succeeded. Suddenly, Tiny reveals himself from behind a wall and explains that he suspected this would happen. He is relieved that he chose to remain behind. The group is completely shocked by his sudden appearance. Tiny points out that their actions were extremely easy to predict. He admits he is truly surprised to see Captain Truman among them. Tiny demands an explanation from the captain. One of the knights defends Truman, saying Tiny is only an outsider who knows nothing about his past. This captain founded the order and trained an entire generation of warriors, yet he felt humiliated after being pushed aside to guard a mere relic. Tiny asks whether Truman always wanted to be a knight, making the captain recall his past. He remembers realizing his physical limits early, because he stood beside a far more gifted comrade. That realization made him focus on service and administration instead of elite training. But his path was blocked when a baron and baroness barrenness forced him into this quiet position. Truman believes the current king treated him unfairly by ignoring his circumstances. Because of that neglect, he turned to Rittman, the only person who gave him a new purpose after a lifetime of being overlooked. He believes Rittman's plan to create a new kingdom serves the greater good, but Tiny sees it differently. To Tiny, the captain is a victim of Rittman's manipulation and someone trying to excuse a dark alliance with demons. Truman declares there is no way back and orders his squad to capture Tiny, convinced that future generations will one day justify his choices. The knights charge with their swords, but Tiny faces them directly. He swings his weapon, smashing them away and sending them flying in different directions. Truman watches in disbelief as one person tears apart his entire unit. Tiny openly enjoys the fight, using martial arts of such a high level that the captain realizes his squad has already lost. With wounded men scattered across a blood-covered floor, Truman decides he has to use a desperate trump card to turn the situation around. The captain throws a red orb at Tiny. When Tiny knocks it aside, the object strikes the floor and releases thick, poisonous dark smoke. The smoke expands rapidly and soon takes the shape of a massive demon. The monster releases a deafening roar that shakes the entire room. Truman suddenly becomes terrified because the demon is dangerously close to the holy relic. Just then, the demon turns against the captain, lifting him high into the air to devour him. Tiny immediately swings his hammer with crushing force and severs the demon's arm. The severed arm drops to the floor, trapping the bleeding captain beneath it. Truman is confused and wonders why Tiny saved him. Tiny demands to know where the creature came from, and the captain uses his remaining strength to explain that Rittman gave it to him as a last resort. As the demon screams and prepares to attack again, Tiny notices that the sacred barrier around the artifact is already dissolving the creature. He realizes Rittman deliberately set the captain up to fail by giving him a monster that would be destroyed by the very relic he was supposed to protect. The demon ignores its wounds and flies toward the divine artifact. Tiny shouts a warning and throws himself into the air. With his weapon, he punches a huge hole through the monster's torso. The demon's eyes still burn with hatred, tries to rise higher for another attack. Tiny refuses to let anything happen to the artifact he has sworn to guard. Meanwhile, on the island's shore, a hooded man stands over several fallen bodies. He notices the chaos across the island and asks his companion to explain what is happening. The companion studies the strange marks on the ground and detects concealment magic. He explains that the island ritual is probably a diversion and that the true target is Karun. This realization fills him with dread as he understands that Tiny is in serious danger. Tiny knows demons value obedience more than their own lives. The monster charges at him without hesitation, ready to carry out its order. Tiny quickly avoids the attack and slips behind it, aiming for its blind spot. With all his strength, he brings his hammer down on the demon's head. Blood splashes across the ground as the creature collapses. Even then, Tiny knows it is not dead yet. Refusing to risk it, he climbs higher to build momentum. Then he throws himself forward and lands one final crushing blow. The creature cannot withstand it, and the impact is powerful enough to burst its body apart. Tiny jumps back just in time, leaving only a severed arm behind. Breathing hard, Tiny realizes how powerful the Demon King's followers truly are. Their magic is far stronger than he expected. When the dust clears, he realizes Captain Truman has vanished. Despite the betrayal, Tiny refuses to let him get away. He climbs onto his wolf and immediately gives chase. Meanwhile, Truman is badly injured. Blood runs from his body as he staggers through a dark tunnel. His steps are unsteady, and every breath grows heavier. At the tunnel's end, he sees a door glowing faintly with strange light. Believing he has finally found safety, he collapses before it. As his strength drains away, he thinks about the demon he just encountered. Surviving it feels like a miracle, but he knows his wounds are fatal. His dream of creating a new kingdom has collapsed, and the faith he once believed in gives him no comfort now. Suddenly, Tiny appears in front of him. Truman is stunned that the boy survived the demon. Tiny coldly says that hiding in a sewer was a bad decision. Truman does not argue. He only gives a weak smile, knowing his end is close. Tiny demands answers about the enemy's plans, but the captain's voice is already fading. With great effort, Truman whispers something about a promise. A moment later, his head falls back and his breathing stops. Tiny looks at the corpse, thinking this pathetic end came from choosing demons over honor. The silence does not last. Walling senses a powerful mana presence beyond the nearby door. Staying cautious, Tiny steps inside. There, he finds the tsunami sorcerer lying face down on the floor. When he turns the body over, he realizes the sorcerer is already dead. This leaves him confused, since the mana his wolf sensed could not have come from a corpse. Then, he notices a small crack in the baby nearby. It is not breathing either. When Tiny touches touches the creature, a rush of memories and knowledge floods into his mind. He understands that the sorcerer used his final strength to protect the young creature. At that moment, a terrifying evil aura fills the room, as powerful as the sin of gluttony itself. Tiny knows he cannot waste even a second. He quickly uses his remaining magic and casts a powerful mana restoration spell. A massive beam of light shoots into the sky, cutting through the darkness like a pillar of hope. Back at the palace, the king sees the pillar of light from his study and immediately recognizes it as Gale's work. The king secretly believes the legendary Kraken is already moving toward his kingdom. Just then, the first prince, Henry von Karen, rushes into the room. He reports that a massive tsunami is heading straight for the city. The wave is moving too quickly for a full evacuation. He urges the king to declare the highest emergency level immediately. The king falls into deep despair. If the old legends about the Kraken are true, Karen may not survive this disaster without a miracle. Just then, a calm voice interrupts and asks whether the king intends to give up so easily. Tiny steps inside, carrying the lifeless body of the tsunami warlock, Gale, over his shoulders. The royal aide tries to stop him for violating protocol, but Tiny ignores the objection and carefully places the body on the floor. He explains that Gale fought bravely to protect Karen until his final breath, but the demon followers killed him. The king burns with anger, realizing that one of the kingdom's 7 pillars has fallen. Even so, Tiny says there is still hope. Before his death, Gale prepared a special shield meant to protect the city in its darkest hour. The king remains uncertain. He says even holy power has its limits. A divine artifact alone may not be enough to stop a monster as enormous as the Kraken. Tiny reminds him of the ancient scriptures. They clearly state that God-given artifacts are stronger than any monster. If they trust that power, it will overcome the beast. Tiny's confidence restores the king's resolve. He immediately orders a full emergency response. Mages are commanded to protect citizens from the rising water. Soldiers are ordered to guide people to the inner square or move them to nearby islands for safety. However, a night soon brings grim news. Every ship in the harbor has been destroyed. The final escape route is gone. Outside the city, an enemy elder watches the wreckage drifting across the water with satisfaction. He knows the people are now trapped. Since part of their earlier plan was exposed and disrupted by the knights, he orders his deputy to call reinforcements and eliminate anyone who gets in their way. Dark demonic smoke spreads around him as he watches the Kraken approach. He laughs quietly, saying the real performance is about to begin. Inside the city, panic spreads as the tsunami draws closer. The mages push past their limits, spending every drop of mana to slow the sea. It is a dangerous effort that leaves them exhausted and barely standing. At the same time, Hustle watches the chaos from afar. He waits until fear reaches its peak before activating sea evil magic. His goal is clear. He intends to wipe out the royal bloodline and extinguish the divine artifact's light forever. He declares to his followers that the hour of Malum has finally come. 2 days pass. The city remains flooded, and its people are exhausted from constant fear and struggle. Tiny looks at the worn-out citizens and the weary king. He quietly suggests that the monarch should rest, even briefly. But before a decision can be made, the air suddenly shifts. Tiny senses a strange, overwhelming force approaching. His face turns serious as he realizes the main threat has finally arrived. In the distance, a towering wall of water rises like a mountain. Above it, huge tentacles stretch into the sky. The Kraken's massive body appears, casting its shadow over the city. At that moment, it becomes clear that Karun's final fate is about to be decided. As the sea erupts without warning, panic spreads across the land. The sight of the colossal creature rising from the water sends people fleeing in every direction. Liam struggles to understand what he is seeing while the king stands frozen as the truth sinks in. The Kraken has truly appeared. Amid the chaos, Tiny rushes to the king with a heavy bag. He explains that it contains what Anderson left behind for them. The king understands at once and calls for Wooling. He places his trust in Tiny, knowing there is no time to hesitate. Tiny mounts Wooling and launches forward, certain that this is his duty. As he moves, the king is struck by a memory. He remembers the demon follower apologizing for leaving his side, explaining that he fought to the very end for the king and the nation. The demon follower had promised to leave the remains of his devotion with Tiny. That memory strengthens the king's resolve. Tiny flies through the air with Walling while the Kraken follows close behind. When the creature surrounds him, he realizes that its main body is still far away. Walling reacts sharply, making him understand that a chance may still exist. The sensation of moving through the sky reminds him of something he has felt before. Because of that memory, he activates the third stage of Spirit Summoner. Lightning links him to the wolf at incredible speed, and the power feels both overwhelming and exhilarating exhilarating. He lands directly on one of the Kraken's tentacles and prepares to move toward its main body. Suddenly, the creature lets out a deafening scream. The force of the sound shakes him, and he covers his ears to withstand it. He assumes the Kraken can sense him because of its child. The demon follower had once explained that traces were left inside the baby Kraken's body. Even if the creature thinks only like an animal, it can still recognize the one who killed its offspring. That explanation now fits. Tiny swings his hammer with full strength and strikes. The impact drives the baby Kraken's body into its mother. For a moment, he thinks the plan has worked. Instead, the giant Kraken releases another overwhelming roar, followed by a violent surge of power. The explosion knocks Tiny off balance. He closes his eyes as he falls from Wooling, filled with regret as he wonders whether he made a mistake. Before he can hit the ground, someone catches him safely. A calm voice tells him to relax. When he looks up, he recognizes Gina standing before him. At that same moment, a massive tentacle crashes into the ground nearby, causing another explosion. They remain standing amid the destruction. Tiny worries that Gina's presence could create political trouble, but Gina explains that the situation is too urgent and that he is disguised, so there will be no problem. Tiny knows Gina is no ordinary knight. A man with silver mana and a cold attribute who reached challenger rank at a young age is truly rare. Because of that, Tiny feels relieved. They notice the Kraken suddenly growing calm. The change feels strange. At the same time, Tiny senses something else. The devil followers lie unconscious on the ground. Their presence explains the earlier explosion. He realizes the blast was part of their plan. Even so, Anderson's strategy has worked to some degree. Then the enormous Kraken rises again, shocking them both. Fear immediately returns. Gina steps forward in confusion because no devil followers remain nearby. Tiny understands that something is still hidden. He needs more information, so he asks about the summoning magic Gina had been investigating. Janice explains that most of it should have been destroyed, though the spell was created to hide the presence of something. That clue makes everything connect in Tiny's mind. The followers must be concealing something important. He suddenly understands the truth. Their real target is the divine object. Without wasting another moment, Tiny summons the silver wolf spirit and closes his eyes. In his vision, the palace comes into view. He concentrates further, demanding a more exact location. The image becomes clearer and shows the devil followers moving toward the castle. With that confirmation, he immediately mounts Walling and speeds away. Gina questions why he is leaving the Kraken behind, but Tiny knows what matters most. The divine object must be protected first. Only by securing it can the holy promises remain unbroken. The city turns into a nightmare as the Kraken's huge tentacles tear through the streets. Fear spreads through every part of the capital. Near the cathedral, the knights guarding the divine artifact struggle to remain calm. Although the holy object surrounds the grounds with a protective aura, the soldiers' hands shake. They tell themselves that as long as the cathedral stands, the city still has hope. That fragile hope breaks when a dark figure steps out of the shadows. The intruder laughs at the hidden spells protecting the knights and mocks their desperate resistance. They are demon followers, and to them, the knights are nothing more than a small obstacle. Hustle raises his hand, releasing a suffocating cloud of energy from his palm. A dark beam follows, and the soldiers cry out as the dense mist swallows them in an instant. At the same time, Tiny and Gina charge forward on their mounts. They are quickly approaching the divine artifact's location. Tiny assures Gina that the target is just ahead. Before they can reach it, more demon followers block the way. Tiny tightens his grip on the hammer, irritated by the chaos around them. Gina does not hesitate and takes charge of clearing the path. He releases a powerful beam from his hand, scattering the enemies with incredible speed. Tiny watches in awe, once again reminded of Gina's overwhelming strength. As they advance, Gina wonders whether the followers can even handle the divine artifact, considering the ancient restrictions placed on it. Tiny admits that it is possible because he has already seen it happen before. That memory fills him with a heavy sense of dread. The Kraken's destruction feels too precise to be a random disaster. He fears that something far worse is unfolding. His fear is confirmed when Liam suddenly appears with his weapon drawn, rejoining them among the ruins. Before anyone can speak, a giant tentacle crashes into the ground right in front of them. The impact leaves all three men stunned. As the dust clears, Tiny sees a demon follower standing ahead, holding the core of the divine artifact. The sight confirms his worst fears. The artifact has already been stolen, and its disappearance is exactly what allowed the Kraken to appear. Without the holy object, the ancient protections are gone. Janice finally understands how serious the situation is. They are not merely fighting a monster. They are facing a black magician from the seven-circled dark warlocks. The enemy smiles, amused by the opponents before him. He recognizes the power of Amor's descendant and two two elite knights, seeing them as a real threat to his master's plan. Dark lightning crackles in his hand. He decides to end the battle at once and attacks with his power. Janice senses the lightning rushing toward Tiny and moves instantly to shield him. Liam joins the defense, bracing himself against the electric surge. The demon follower mocks their struggle and keeps releasing destructive energy. Tiny realizes they cannot hold out in a defensive fight for long. The only way to end this chaos is to take back the divine artifact. He sees the demon follower rising into the air and immediately guides Walling toward him, determined to reclaim the core. From below, the demon follower fires a lightning bolt at the climbing rider. Janice jumps into the sky to intercept the attack. Liam watches in shock as Janice takes the full force of a seven-circle strike directly. It is a dangerous move, but Janice does not falter. Janice uses the first equinox technique of the Valencia swordsmanship. The freezing song of his blade collides with the dark energy. As the shadows begin closing in around him, he remembers the king's command. The king had insisted that protecting Tiny was essential for the safety of the entire world. Faith had to be preserved. Even when the path became difficult, Janice lands firmly on the ground, determined to follow the king's orders. He forces the demon follower to focus on him alone. Liam warns that the danger is increasing, while the demon follower grows irritated. While Janice thinks he must now rely entirely on Tiny, the demon follower becomes more amused when he sees Janice and Liam standing together. Since both of them are challenger rank knights, he decides to test them properly. Dark lightning gathers in his hands and erupts forward with crushing force. Both knights brace themselves and hold their positions. Liam channels all his strength into defense, then advances and sends a powerful sword strike toward the demon follower. The demon follower barely reacts. Instead, he releases lightning into the ground, causing a violent explosion that disrupts Liam's attack. He mocks their effort, convinced that nothing they try will succeed. That confidence disappears when he senses energy building behind him. He turns too late. Janice's attack spirals around him like a tornado and slams him down. Liam rushes toward Janice, relieved that they may still handle this fight. He admits he never expected Sir Tiny to have someone like Janice beside him. Janice does not focus on the word friend. Before either of them can recover, a cold voice cuts through the air. The demon follower rises once more, protected by dark lightning swirling around his body. He finally recognizes Janice and calls him Valencia's dog. Liam immediately understands what he means. Janice realizes his disguise has been exposed. Now serious, the demon follower declares that he will personally eliminate them. Dark lightning gathers into an even more terrifying attack and fires straight toward them. Both knights instantly understand that they cannot block it completely. The strike lands close enough to send them flying. As Janice regains his footing, he realizes just how dangerous this opponent truly is. He takes a fighting stance, ready to close the distance and strike before another attack can form. But just as he prepares to move, a sudden presence breaks his focus and forces him to stop. Elsewhere, the demon follower carrying the divine artifact turns and sees Tiny racing toward him on Walling. Tiny charges without hesitation and attacks. The impact knocks the demon follower off balance, sending him falling into the sea below. Tiny watches him drop and assumes the fight is over. That assumption shatters when the figure rises from the water again. It is Hustle. Now that they are above the sea, Hustle feels confident. He calls Tiny a fool for choosing to fight on water, where he has the advantage. Tiny refuses to retreat and rushes forward with his hammer raised, determined to change the outcome this time. Hustle braces himself and unleashes waves of water attacks, vowing to make the sea Tiny's grave. Water closes around Tiny from every side. Hustle believes his victory is guaranteed. Then Tiny's voice rings out from above. Hustle looks up and sees Tiny floating high in the air. The sudden change leaves him shocked. Tiny has become far stronger than he expected. Tiny swings his hammer and launches a counterattack. He moves quickly through the air, closes the distance to Hustle, and strikes with force. Hustle chooses to retreat rather than face him directly. He dives deep into the sea, escaping with the divine artifact. In the depths, he hides the artifact inside a whale and tries to slip away unnoticed. Tiny tracks the movement and crashes down toward the whale. He strikes its neck with his hammer and forces it to spit out the divine artifact. The moment he grabs it, relief passes through him because he refuses to let Hustle escape so easily. Remembering that the fight is not finished, he raises his hammer again and crushes the whale with lightning. Blood spreads through the water, followed by a violent explosion. The whale dies beneath the surface. Tiny exhales, but panic seizes him. If this keeps going, he will fail to protect the divine artifact and Karun will fall. Realizing that, he understands there is only one choice left. He must stop the Kraken himself. Tiny feels a heavy, evil pressure crushing his head. The pain pain becomes so intense that he quickly unwraps the divine artifact and raises it toward the sky. He begs the giant beast to stop attacking because the people nearby are suffering. The Kraken refuses to listen. It declares that everyone must be sacrificed to cleanse the world of evil. Since the artifact is no longer in its rightful place, the beast believes it is free to break its ancient promises. It raises a massive tentacle, ready to crush the city, making it clear that it has no intention of stopping. Tiny holds his position and shouts for the monster to stop. His defiance directs the Kraken's rage straight at him. The beast recognizes him as the one holding that power, but asks why it should ever forget the pain of losing its child. The force of its divine wrath strikes Tiny so hard that he coughs blood. Even through the pain, he senses that the beast is not merely angry, but grieving. Because Tiny understands that sorrow, he promises to hunt down those who killed its child. He asks the Kraken to trust him and end the destruction. At first, the beast doubts his strength. Tiny admits that he will find a way to become stronger. His honesty changes the Kraken's decision, and the divine beast finally agrees to help him. Nearby, Janice finally regains consciousness. Liam is relieved to see him alive, while Janice admits he truly thought that place would become his grave. Their attention turns to the demon follower, who clenches his teeth in fury. Even though the situation has turned against him, the villain refuses to stop. The follower rises into the air, surrounded by dark lightning. He mocks the knights and prepares a massive wave of darkness to burn everything. Before he can complete it, a giant tentacle crashes into him. He realizes it is not a coincidence. When the Kraken starts striking him again and again, Liam watches in confusion, wondering why the beast is suddenly attacking only their enemy. As the Kraken leaves a permanent wound on the follower, Janice understands what is happening. He notices the beast's power is not harming the knights at all. This makes him realize that Tiny has succeeded in his mission. The wounded demon follower still refuses to surrender. He summons a strange, unnatural power, creating a huge red flower in the sky. The plant grows quickly and sends out vines to bind the knights. While Janice and Liam cut through the stalks, the follower screams and hides inside the closing petals. The knights think he may be trying to escape, but the plant suddenly turns toward the city. Liam charges at it with all his strength, but his attacks have no effect. The vines throw both knights aside like toys. They quickly get back on their feet and rush toward the castle to stop the monster. When they come close to the city, they freeze in shock. The knights who should be guarding the castle are still there, but they look like walking corpses. The knights before the castle no longer seem human. Their eyes are hollow and terrifying. They repeat the same words over and over, chanting about death and glory as if a powerful force is controlling them. Not far away, Hustle slams his hand down in rage. Because of the interference, an important task has been ruined. Even so, he convinces himself that the objective can still be achieved somehow. He openly challenges the so-called weak knights to stop him if they can. Janice and Liam hear every word. When the man mentions his goal, Liam immediately realizes the direction leads straight to the king's chamber. If that is the target, then the king is in danger. The possessed knights charge at them, still repeating their twisted commands. Liam decides there is no time to hesitate. He tells Janice to take care of some of them and rushes ahead. He strikes with precision, using the flat side of his blade so he does not kill them. Although he hates seeing fellow knights reduced to this state, he forces himself to break through. The only priority now is reaching the king. Janice notices that Liam is holding back his lethal force and decides to act with slightly more restraint as well. Inside the royal chamber, the demon follower already stands before the king. One knight is lifted into the air by dark lightning, struggling helplessly. The demon follower crushes his face and slams him onto the floor without mercy. He then steps closer to the throne and mockingly introduces himself, as if royalty deserves at least that much courtesy. The king instantly recognizes him as the mastermind behind the chaos. The demon follower confirms it proudly. As a reward, he declares that Karun's bloodline will end tonight. Dark lightning gathers around him as he prepares to strike. Before he can finish, Janice appears behind him and attacks. The demon follower mocks him, saying his attacks are pointless. At that same moment, Liam strikes from the other side. They apologize to the king for arriving late, explaining that they only managed to reach the castle moments ago. The king feels relieved to see Liam still alive. The demon follower laughs at their arrival and says it only means more people will die. He gathers a massive amount of dark lightning and prepares an overwhelming attack. Liam quickly understands the situation. Even if he avoids it, the king will not survive the blast. There is only one choice. He apologizes in advance and pulls Janice in front of him as a shield. Janice has no time to understand what is happening before the attack slams into them. In that moment, Liam remembers the day the king appointed him as a royal guard and trusted him to protect the city. When the smoke clears, Liam is kneeling on the cracked floor while Janice lies unconscious nearby. Regret strikes him deeply. He blames himself for not always fighting as if his life depended on it. He feels unworthy of being called a noble. The king steps forward despite the danger and reminds him that evil power preys on weakness in the mind. What matters is refusing to give up even after making reckless decisions. Liam urges the king not to overexert himself, but the king insists he can endure it. Then Janice regains consciousness and Janice snaps in anger. He makes it clear that he survived by his own strength and condemns Liam for using him as a shield. He does not hide his resentment and refuses to forget what happened. Liam accepts the blame and promises to make it right later. For now, the enemy is still standing. Above them, the demon follower is shocked that they survived. Enraged, he gathers even more dark magic. Janice quickly realizes they have only one chance. They must destroy his evil energy completely. The demon follower releases his attack, believing it will end everything. Janice activates his second technique and swings his sword, creating the Song of Raging Winds. The force shocks the demon follower, who cannot believe a challenger rank fighter can produce such power. At the same time, Liam attacks from behind with Karen's Royal Guard fourth technique, striking with all his strength. Their combined blow crashes into the demon follower like a boulder. He screams as his body turns into smoke and disappears. For a brief moment, they think it is finished. The king collapses from exhaustion, and his subordinates rush to him in panic. Janice quickly notices something is wrong. He points out that they only cut off one of the demon follower's arms. That means he escaped. Elsewhere, the injured demon follower curses in frustration. He tries to summon the shadows, but they no longer answer. Nearly a third of their forces had been Toru into this mission, yet he still ended up injured. The situation is slipping out of his control. Then he looks up at the sky. Tiny is riding above on Walling, holding the divine object. The sight leaves him stunned. Somehow, that young boy now stands at the center of everything. The demon follower stares at Tiny in disbelief. Tiny responds calmly, almost as if teasing him, which only intensifies the demon follower's rage. Dark magic gathers in his raised hand. He admits he cannot understand how Tiny obtained the divine object, but decides it no longer matters. He sends a wave of evil energy straight toward him. Instead of retreating, Tiny smiles and urges Walling forward. The wolf charges directly into the attack, shocking the demon follower. Tiny activates Iron God. He controls his weight with precision, grounding himself heavily while accelerating, then lightening his body at the moment of launch. With his iron body reinforced, he crashes straight into the dark attack and breaks through it. The demon follower cannot believe what he is seeing. Tiny keeps pushing forward without hesitation, declaring that he is coming for him. He calls Walling again, mounts quickly, and charges. His hammer crashes into the demon follower and sends him falling. The demon follower mocks him, but Tiny senses the truth. The enemy is weaker than before, so he prepares to finish him. Suddenly, the demon follower raises a finger and gathers a massive amount of evil magic. Even after losing one leg, he smiles as dark energy spreads in every direction. He admits that Tiny has forced him to use his final option. The energy begins gathering violently. Tiny recognizes it at once. The power is similar to a fire sacrifice. The demon follower screams that he will burn Tiny alive and kill him in the most painful way possible. He unleashes an explosion of dark energy. Tiny immediately senses the danger, realizing that long-range attacks will be useless here. In that desperate moment, he remembers what the divine object taught him. Normally, activating soul requires reaching a superhuman state, but he recalls the experience he already had with his own soul. Holding the divine object tightly, he closes his eyes and concentrates. The demon follower assumes Tiny is finished. Then he feels something change. Tiny activates soul. Shock spreads across the demon follower's face. Someone at expert rank should not be capable of that. Before he can respond properly, Tiny opens his eyes and takes the chance. He raises his weapon and strikes. The clash throws the demon follower off balance. He loses his footing and starts falling from the sky. As he drops, he screams in disbelief. Tiny moves beneath him and understands that he has succeeded. Desperate, the demon follower seizes Tiny's arms and refuses to accept defeat. He vows to rip him apart, even if it is the last thing he does. Tiny does not fight back. Instead, he smiles. The reason becomes obvious when the Kraken appears behind them. The demon follower panics and tries to flee, insisting the beast will not catch him this time. Tiny grips his leg tighter and holds him in place. The demon follower warns that Tiny will die too. Tiny calmly replies that this means the demon follower will definitely die. Before the demon follower can escape, a massive tentacle slams down and swallows him. Smoke fills the air as his presence vanishes completely. Tiny starts falling falling from the sky. Panic hits him again because he has no mana left to summon Wolong. From this height, the fall will kill him. He curses the situation, refusing to die this way. Then the fall stops. He realizes he has landed on the Kraken itself. The surface beneath him feels strange, but stable. The divine beast holds him carefully. The Kraken speaks, and its voice no longer carries anger. It thanks Tiny for his help and admits that its rage has finally faded. Tiny smiles and dismisses it as nothing serious. Soon after, the kingdom of Karun announces what happened. The demon follower almost destroyed the kingdom, but one young hero stopped its fall. The enemies were defeated, and even the Kraken was handled. In recognition of his courage, the king gives Tiny the title of Shining Knight. 3 months pass, and because Tiny trains without distraction, his progress becomes clear. When Genus watches him now, he can hardly believe how much he has changed in such a short time. Tiny explains that he focuses only on improving himself and uses a secret growth technique, which is why his development has accelerated so rapidly. As they walk together, Genus notices how much the kingdom has recovered during his healing. The damage from the battle has almost disappeared. Tiny reminds him that he was badly injured in the last fight and asks whether he should already be walking around. Genus dismisses the concern and admits that the overflow and wounds slowed him down, especially since Liam once used him as a shield, but he insists he is fine now. Then he shifts the attention back to Tiny. Tiny drew out the power of a sacred artifact while still at expert rank and fought an opponent far stronger than himself. That kind of burden always leaves after effects. Tiny admits that his hands still shake and that his mind and body feel slightly misaligned. He laughs it off, but Genus understands that such signs may point to deeper damage. Tiny looks at his hands and thinks about what truly happened. Because his mana and stamina were almost exhausted during the battle, his body and soul lost their balance. While trying to recover, he discovers something unexpected. He learns how to control the power of the soul. This power feels close to mana, but its nature is fundamentally different. By using it in place of his drained mana, he reduces the strain on his body. He quietly demonstrates it by forming magic without using mana. A magic sword appears and cracks a nearby stone. That moment confirms it for him, opening a new path. He realizes the old legend about reaching Aura Master level through soul training may actually be true. Because he refused to give up back then, this possibility now stands before him. Genus feels relieved that Tiny is recovering properly. Then he raises an important matter. He shows Tiny a letter describing their next destination. The Duke wants them to go straight to Elfenheim, but Janus prefers to stop at the capital first. He wants to report everything that happened to the Valencia family before they move on. Tiny reads the letter carefully. He understands that the second disaster will happen during the Azran imperial family's wedding. Elfenheim may be nothing more than an excuse. After learning in his previous life that Janus eventually dies, Tiny suspects someone may be trying to move them away from the real danger. Still, he knows the third disaster will occur in Elfenheim, and he must meet Estina there. He remembers Khloe asking him to treat her like a sister. To him, she has become someone close, almost family, and he feels a strong need to protect her if he can. At the same time, his thoughts shift to the capital. In his previous life, even Janus's captain failed to stop the tragedy there. If both of them go now, the result may change. After considering everything, Tiny makes his choice. He decides to go to the capital first. Janus smiles, since that matches what he wanted. Meanwhile, in the castle, the king addresses everyone, including Tiny and Janus. He announces that reconstruction is progressing well. Following the Radiant Knight's advice, warnings about sacred artifacts and demon followers have been sent to every nation. To restore stability and prosperity in Coron, it is time for Prince Henry's coronation. The king places the crown on Henry's head. Henry accepts it humbly and admits he still feels unworthy of the throne, but he wants to thank the Radiant Knight once again. Tiny feels confused because he was already thanked earlier when he borrowed the sacred artifact. He believes he has received enough rewards, but Henry insists that it is still not enough. At his signal, the soldiers bring forward a special item. Henry explains that enchanted armor is unnecessary for Tiny at his current stage of growth, but this item is different. It is one of the artificial artifacts once used by a former king of Coron during his travels. It is the necklace of mana. Because Henry values Tiny and wants to reward him properly, he presents one of Coron's royal artifacts. He explains that it once belonged to Coron's traveler king and places the necklace before Tiny. Tiny becomes tense, thinking Henry is offering something far too valuable for him to accept. Henry makes it clear that he originally planned to give Tiny a set of transcendent armor. However, every piece of that armor is registered as a national treasure. So he chose the necklace instead and explains that it still contains 6th class magic. Tiny feels uneasy. He already knows Henry is kind by nature, but this level of generosity reality feels overwhelming. He thinks about transcendent armor, especially the 7-circle type with superhuman strength, is so rare that even the 10 knights of the continent have barely used it. Only weapon masters have touched such equipment. The king reassures him that even if all the mana inside the necklace is spent, it restores itself within a day. Hearing that, Tiny accepts it respectfully and considers it an honor. Henry personally places it in his hands and reminds him that whenever he looks at the necklace, he should remember that the city will always stand behind him. Because of this gesture, the people around them begin cheering, proudly calling him the Radiant Knight as Henry raises Tiny's hand before the crowd. Later, outside the city,